Hi, I'm Ben,
And I'm Josh.
and this is the Bad at Magic podcast, a podcast about games, life, and other things, and welcome to episode 88.
So, Ben, did you know that the standard keyboard layout has 88 keys?
I really did.
You
You know
did?
I play the piano, right?
I do know that you play the piano. This
Okay.
is why
Yes, I
I
know
didn't
there's
try to be
88
coy
keys on
about
a
it.
standard keyboard.
Gotcha. Well, do you know why there's 88 keys on a standard keyboard?
That I do not know, Josh. Will you enlighten me and our listening audience?
So, it became common in the late 19th century. Before that, most pianos had 85 keys, which covered the same range. It was called a short octave piano. It covered the same range as a modern piano, but it only had the 85 instead of 88 keys. The 88 key was standardized by Steinway and Sons in the 1880s, and they're just a big name in piano making, and it just became the standard. Yeah. And it was chosen theoretically because that it covers the entire range of human hearing from the lowest bass to the highest treble. So, I don't know if that was propaganda on Steinway's part, but they were the juggernaut in the piano industry. They created an 88 key layout, and everybody just kind of adopted that.
Okay, so they picked a low note and a high note that said represented this comfortable listening range for an average human, and then made a keyboard that played every chromatic note between those two. And
yeah, every note that you would. There you go. Every note that you would care about.
Yeah, because you can do quarter tones and stuff in between, but you really, on our standard musical scale, it's just sharps and flats and naturals.
Yeah, and you have already exceeded my understanding of music, so I'm no longer a part
I
of this
could tell by the
conversation.
look on your face. All right, Josh. Well, we are recording this the week of Christmas, so it's Christmas time. How you been? What have you been up to?
Well, happy Xmas to you, buddy. It's always good to talk to you around the holidays.
Thanks.
Christmas was good. It was nice. We've been scrambling at work to get stuff done, so it's just been nonstop go, go, go. But then the holidays actually hit, and I was able to slow down, relax, and spend a whole bunch of time with family. Actually, just today, drove back down I took my kids up to see snow, and we went sledding. And it's really funny. You can tell my kids grew up in Arizona because we were driving up to our destination, and the most snow that we saw was how it's kind of patchy and only exists in the shade, like little tiny patches of snow. And both of them were freaking out, look at all the snow. It's amazing. And having gone to college in Colorado, I was like, oh, kids, we need to take you someplace where it actually snows sometime.
Okay, but you went someplace where there was actual sledding, was it just in the shade and a little bit, or had they made artificial snow?
Yeah, so this place had, again, snow in the shade, and then all of its little sled runs they used, clearly it was artificial means to generate snow to keep that, frozen and slippery.
All right, which sounds expensive.
No comment. They definitely... I was there, my kids were having a blast, and so I was just embracing that, but there was just this little cynical part of my brain that I can't ever shut off of, when did we start monetizing sled hills?
Yeah, if they gotta own infrastructure and make snow in order for it to exist, I could see it. But otherwise, if you just live in a part of the world where snow is abundant and plentiful, sled hills are still free.
Well, yeah, that's the thing. If we lived in Colorado, we would do all the free sledding we wanted. But because we live in Arizona and there's only one place in Arizona that you can sled, they're going to charge you for it.
There's got to be more than one. So how far did you have to drive to get there?
2 full hours in the car, freeway the entire way.
Okay, 2 full hours and one way, and you're still in the same state?
2 hours straight north, and we're still in the same state. Yes, that's how long it takes to get from the very north part of Phoenix, where I live, to the very southern tip of Flagstaff, which is where we went.
And what was the temperature differential from when you left to when you arrived?
It actually wasn't too bad. When we left, it was in the mid 70s. That's what it is in Phoenix for Christmas. It was wonderful and just so nice. And then we drove up, and by the time we got there, it was 50-something degrees, so only about 20-degree differential.
Okay.
I don't know what that is in Celsius for all of our, foreign listeners, so I'm sorry for that.
So for my family, we drove from Louisiana to Utah, which is, well over 1,000 miles and 22 hours of driving. and my family had rented out a lodge up in the mountains in Utah, and when we got here, they had just finished plowing the roads from a 3-foot dump of fresh powder.
Oh, geez, that sounds nice.
So like a meter of fresh snow everywhere, and we moved into this lodge, and then we could just step out the door and instantly sled down a hill for free. And it was magical, Josh. It was so awesome. There was 33 of us there. We were all crammed in the same place. That big commercial kitchen for just keeping like food on tap and snacks out all of the time. Giant folding tables and chairs everywhere. And anytime you wanted, you could either step out the door and do some tubing, or come inside and find and play any kind of game you wanted. And the library was virtually endless. And we had, if you wanted a 2-player game, great. If you wanted to do a jigsaw puzzle, fantastic. If you wanted an 8-player game, you could scare up 8 players just like that. It was awesome.
Oh, yeah, I'm jealous of your family activities sometimes, Ben. That sounds like a good one.
You would be welcome, Josh. I want you to know this. Okay, so that's what's been going on here. Now, of course, in the holiday season, we're consuming all of the holiday media and atmosphere. And as you know, Josh, there's music that goes along with all of that. Now, I
Ben,
stumbled
don't
across...
don't you dare do another half-hour special about Mariah Carey.
I stumbled across this study by a guy with his PhD in musicology, and he took the top 200 songs on Spotify during the Christmas season in the year 2017 and found that of those top 200, 78 of them were Christmas songs. And he did some math and data, the kind of thing you love. I'll put some graphics in the show notes, and found that among all those songs there was a formula. And if you follow this formula, this would get you in the top 200 on Spotify in the year, in the 21st century. You needed to have one of the broad lyric themes of like home, being in love, parties, Santa, snow, or religion, peace on earth, those kinds of things. Those are the broad themes of Christmas music. A full half of those songs featured bells in the music. I think that's one of the cues that make music characteristically Christmas music.
That makes sense.
Some of the most commonly occurring words are snow, party, tree, Santa, love, home. 95% of the songs were in a major key. So you want major key, bells, fast tempo. 90% were in the 4/4 time signature, and 68% of the songs had a lead male vocal. So that's something going against Mariah there.
Wow, yeah, you're right.
13% of them were by one lead male vocal, Michael Bublé.
Just milking that Christmas.
So if you want to make the perfect Christmas song, it would be in a major key, be in 4/4 time, be talking about Santa, snow, home, or family, or being in love, have sleigh bells in the chorus, be about 120 to 150 beats per minute, and have Michael Bublé singing the lead. Bam, guaranteed chart topper.
It also helps if your name is Michael Bublé.
If you throw out Michael Bublé, All I Want for Christmas Is You is the perfect Christmas song.
Oh,
it checks all the boxes, every single one of them.
Every year I get to hear about how Mariah Carey's All I Want for Christmas Is You is just the greatest song ever. Yay! We just did a whole episode about how our music interest changes over time as we evolve as people, and depending on the things that we're doing. It seems, I don't know, inconsistent to have one song that just lives with you forever. It just that fits one little niche. I guess you never listen to it quite enough to be sick of it or be over it.
Yeah, I don't know. A lot of the ones are kind of classics. I'll put a graphic that shows, like, of those 78 songs in the top 200, how many are kind of stuck with us from as long as we've had recording devices. There are a few.
No, yeah, there's not a lot of new Christmas music.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was getting at when I was reading this, when I found this study that was done at Berkeley University, and that was, what does it take to get a new Christmas hit? Because there aren't a lot of new Christmas hits. Probably another in recent memory is Around the Tree by Kelly Clarkson. But maybe Christmas Tree Farm by Taylor Swift. But it's pretty sparse. You got to go back a ways to find music that people are willing to accept as part of the Christmas canon.
Okay.
All right, I had a story I wanted to tell you, Josh, that I came across the other day. I was in a meeting. I'd mentioned this meeting on the show. It was my a monthly breakfast with my general officer, and I'd asked him kind of a pointed question that I thought would provoke some thoughtful discussion about willingness to take risk. And he kind of drew a blank and poked me in the chest about it. But then one of the '06 colonels, sitting about 3 or 4 people over from me, spoke up and says, I want to tell you one that happened to me. He said, when I was the security forces squadron commander back at Peterson Air Force Base in Colorado, here's what happened. Now, security forces squadron basically means the cops. They're the defenders. They're the guards at the gate. They're the police patrolling the base. They respond to alarms for secure areas. They guard the aircraft. They patrol the airfield. They keep the base secure in time of war and in time of peace. So the guy that commands that squadron is in charge of somewhere from like 300 to 400, mostly very young, recently joined trained people. Does that capture security forces squadron?
Yeah, I don't want to disparage security forces because they do a lot of the heavy lifting when it comes to what we think of as actually fighting in the Air Force. But at the same time, like the piece of advice that I always gave to some of my subordinates when I was in was like, oh man, security forces get on my nerves so much, and I just want to tell them off. I'm like, okay, first of all, you need to be super polite to all the security forces people because they're 18 or 19 years old. They've got a power complex. They're working a late shift that they don't like. They probably don't like their job, and they will take any excuse that you give them to pull you out of your car through the driver's side window and like put your face in the pavement.
Yeah. So there is a video of a woman that just went viral a couple of weeks ago. I'll put that in the show notes if you're interested in seeing that actually happen. She turned on her cell phone camera to record herself getting pulled through the window and put face down on the pavement.
They'll do it, man.
Oh yeah, they're looking forward to it. Now, they are, for all intents and purposes, first responders, and that's what this story was about. So there is at the north end of Peterson Air Force Base in Colorado Springs a main gate that approaches a main highway. It's on the north side of the airfield, which is not in close proximity to the civilian airport, so it's kind of distant from all of the civilian um, facilities and services that are normally available off base. So to get to the nearest fire department, the nearest police station is kind of far, and the Air Force Base itself is kind of like a little city. Well, what was happening is that immediately outside of this gate, there was an intersection that had some high speeds, and for what during times of limited visibility or uh, low grip conditions on the road, there would be accidents at this intersection. And of course, what has to happen is that when an accident occurs there, they have to call the civilian authorities because it happens off of the military installation. The proximity to the military police and the military fire department and the military life-saving crews is, 1 or 2 minutes, 5 max. But the civilian crews are 10 to 15 to 20 minutes away.
Okay.
But it's really important to maintain the separation between the federal facility and its jurisdiction and the civilian land and city outside of that. So what would happen is it would be a terrible accident. The cops could literally see it from their guard shack and not be able to do a thing about it because it was outside of their jurisdiction. Classic thing civilians sometimes don't understand. What's your understanding, Josh, of why it would be important to maintain that jurisdictional separation?
Oh, well, there's all kinds of legal ramifications for stuff like that. Like, what happens if, like, there's a car accident and then the first responders from the base actually go out there, but they're not within their jurisdiction and somebody dies? Like, who gets sued? Does the civilian now have the right to sue the military for not providing adequate support if that's actually what happened? Like, it just, everything gets really, really complex and muddy when it comes to who's accountable for what.
Yeah, I think it's easy to see this if we just change the border. Like, what if that was the U.S. Mexico border and someone died on the U.S. side and the Mexican cops ran across and started helping?
Yeah, it gets really muddy really quick.
Yeah, so there's this very clear, very important separation. But what had happened is there'd been an accident at this intersection, and either someone was severely injured or even had died while the cops were just sitting there watching them die. Like, car rolled over, burning, flames, and the first responders that probably could have helped couldn't because of jurisdictional issues.
Okay. I mean, there
So
seems like there's things you could probably do with local authorities, some kind of agreements for stuff like this.
yes, and I love when this kind of things happens, and this is where the story goes. So the commander of that unit, because of the proximity of a relevant tragedy, they were like, "Hey, maybe we can come to some kind of agreement here that if this specific scenario comes up, that we should be able to respond and do something about it." And so they made an agreement. The local cops and the guys on base made an agreement. And in this gray period before something had come up, there'd been an incident where like someone had gotten in an accident on the freeway off ramp, and there happened to be a police cruiser from the base off base, and he stopped. And of course, he turned on his lights to warn people that might be approaching, so that they wouldn't like run into them or they would see them or whatever. And it looked like a military police was pulling people over off of the military installation. And it made the news and it went viral, and it had these bad optics of the federal government overreaching.
Absolutely. Well, you were speeding. It doesn't matter who pulls you over. You were breaking the law.
Right. And that's bad optics, and that's exactly the kind of jurisdictional separation that they're trying to prevent. However, within a little bit of time following that, there was another terrible accident at that intersection. The cops on base went out, were able to respond in time, help the person, and they basically saved someone's life. And so I like hearing when we're able to do something common sense instead of just following the strict letter of the law no matter what.
I mean, yeah,
And
the end state of what you're talking about is just common sense, but I can guarantee that the process to get there was a bureaucratic nightmare. I can just imagine the
yeah,
wing king or the base commander going into the judge advocate general's office, the lawyer's office for the military, and
right.
be like, "Hey, write me up a letter or something that I can send over to the governor that would let our people work on civilians outside of the base property." And just
And he's
watching
like, "Say what now?"
yeah, just I'm sorry, sir, I couldn't hear you. It sounded like you went insane for a second. You want to try to run that by me again?
Yeah, just like that. Well, all's well that ends well. They have this agreement that basically for, emergencies that require first responders, the guys at the gate can run outside and help, and they save someone's life. The two guys, I think, that responded to this one particular event were named the Policeman of the Year by the Colorado City Springs Police.
Oh, and I'm sure there was some people that were mad about that. Like, there aren't even Colorado Springs City police officers.
I don't know. I guess you're right. I guess there's people mad about anything, but come on. If that isn't a feel-good story, I don't know what is.
Well, I mean, that's a pretty feel-good story, but I can still poke some negative, pessimistic holes in it. But since it's Christmas, I'll let you have this one, buddy.
Okay, good. Now, along the lines of just doing my job, I had an experience at a drive-through this week, Josh, but I think it's been long enough, and it was early enough in the history of the Bad at Magic podcast that we need to lay down the full groundwork here. So I want you to give your opinion on the social interaction at a fast food drive-through window.
Yeah, I'm going to disappoint you a little bit and say that I'm slowly starting to shift depending on the circumstances. But
Ooh.
well, we don't have to go into
All right. Well, maybe you and I have reversed roles here. Wait till you hear my story.
All right. Well, here is what you want me to say. Okay.
Okay.
And when this whole thing started like a few years back. The whole we're still working on your order. It's going to be a minute. Can you please pull around to the front of the restaurant so we can serve the people in line behind you? That irritated me to no end, and it ground against like the foundation of society, in my opinion, because civilization is built on the concept of first come, first serve.
Right. So you were there first.
Well, and
those guys can wait. You got in line first.
Exactly. And then also, it didn't help that I had a couple of very glaringly bad experiences. Again, this was back when it first started, where I was told to pull around, and I would wait for 15-20 minutes and watch 5 cars go through the drive-thru after I had ordered like 2 burgers and some fries, and have to get out of my car and go inside and not only tell them, hey, you forgot my order, but then prove that I had actually bought something from them before I got the food. So that led to this opinion that I formed of, I'm just not going to do that. They don't control me. They're not the boss of me. They can't physically move my car. And so I stopped doing it. For the longest time,
Okay.
People would say...
So how does that actually work? Let's role play it. Okay, sir, it looks like your order just got dropped into the fryer. That's going to take about 5 minutes. Do you mind pulling forward, and then we'll bring your order out to you?
Oh, no, that's okay. I can just wait right here. Thank you. Like
Okay.
even like you're trying to role play it, and you're like you have nothing. There's no response to that.
Yeah, I don't know what to say next.
Well, and that's the thing. Like I've only ever had legitimate pushback from somebody doing that one time. Every other time, it just happened the way that you exactly played it out, where the person just kind of stunned, like, and then it all comes crashing down, realizing they're not actually the boss of me, and so then they just kind of like go back to what they were doing. There was one person that actually gave me some serious guff, and if my wife hadn't been in the car, I might have raised a stink. But because my better half was there to temper my outburst, we just did what they said and pulled forward, and then waited an absurdly long time for our food.
Okay, I want to give a completely unresearched hypothetical history lesson. And that is, I think that whatever it was when this thing started happening, because no one even conceived of it. I used to work fast food when I was a teenager, and this wasn't a thing. There was no like, please pull forward, sir, your order's going to take a long time. It was just like, first come, first serve, always.
Right.
If someone pulls up, at Taco Bell, if someone pulled up at the window and was ordering food for 40 people, and they ordered like 4 party packs, like then the guy behind him in the line that ordered 1 bean burrito, it just sucks to be him. He's got to wait.
And that's what society is built on. First come, first serve.
Right. So some middle managers like, we make more money when we have a faster quality of service, but we only have one window on the outside of the building serving people. We could serve more people if we have a way to identify and separate these exceptional orders that take a long time to make. So if we can just have the car that ordered 40 tacos pull forward, and we keep working on the order, but then we can filter the 1 bean burrito through and move another 6 cars, then because the opportunity cost is if the line backs up and somebody pulls into your parking lot and sees that it's all the way full, they leave and go to another restaurant. That's the money you're losing.
Well, all right, so here I'm going to counterpoint what you're talking about. Like, I completely understand and agree that's where it's coming from. And I would agree with you wholeheartedly if it wasn't for the trends that I notice when I'm asked to pull forward. Whenever I order, like I can order like an above average amount of burgers and fries at a normal burger place, and they won't tell me to pull forward. But if I order a chicken sandwich, or if I order like a fish sandwich, something that's got to go in the deep fryer that they don't have ready, that's when they tell me and they ask me to pull forward. And so then it goes back to this. It's like, yes, you're saying our optics would be better, our turnover rate would be better, and we would provide better service if we can identify these people. My counter argument to that is, stop serving crap that you don't have ready.
Okay. And I think this will play into a discussion we're going to have later on. But early on in these kinds of ideas, when some of the middle managers just has a bright idea, like, how about we tell our regional managers, to tell the owners, to tell the store managers, to tell the assistant managers, to tell the trainers, to tell the low level, recently hired, probably not going to be there for more than 6 months employees, to try to do this thing. It's going to lose a lot in translation. If the idea works and it sticks over time, it's going to cause other things. They'll be able to provide, their computer systems will integrate this idea.
Oh, Ben.
Their construction of their buildings will integrate this idea. The painting of the lines on the road outside will integrate this idea.
You're bringing this up on purpose because I was going to talk about this too. Like the McDonald's that's in my town right now implemented this a long time ago, and it's become so normalized that not only did they remodel their drive-thru so it has 2 ordering spots, so it can take double the amount of orders that it normally does, but it switched all of the parking spots that are closest to the building. Like, we're talking 8 parking spots are all now labeled for the drive-through pickup only.
Yeah.
And like,
okay. But that's what I'm talking about. Early on, it's just like a management-only idea. It's like a bright idea. You tell people to try this new thing, but it's kind of weak and it fails and it has things at the margins that don't make sense. And I want to tell you about one that happened to me.
Okay.
So in Louisiana, a week and a half ago, there was a big storm blew through. It was the kind we got, like the warning popped up on your cell phone about.
Okay.
Have you ever gotten one of those?
We don't get a lot of those in Arizona. Usually it's for high wind.
When I was a kid, there used to be sirens outside, but now they can like tell the local cell phone providers to notify all the people within certain geographic proximity, and it's pretty accurate. And it said, tornado warning, get inside right now.
Okay.
So of course I went to the store to play Magic.
That's inside. That totally counts.
Right. So I was playing Magic, and we came out, and it was like 9:30 p.m. Still reasonable time to get something to eat. And we drove past the closest McDonald's, and there was no one in the drive-thru, and the store was open. So and the storm had passed. It wasn't even raining. It just everything was wet and shiny. But the store had employees inside. You could see them from the outside and stuff. So we pull into the drive-thru, not a soul in sight. We place our order. We each order a burger and fries and a drink, like 2 people.
Standard, normal McDonald's order.
Pull up to the window, pay. I think they even had both windows operating, so we paid at the first window, pulled up to the second window. They hand out our drinks to us, and then the employee looks at me and said, "Sir, could you please pull forward?"
Bro, dude, kid, there is nobody in line behind me.
I could not restrain myself. I poked my head out the window and looked behind me and said, "Do you realize there's not a soul in sight? Why on earth are you asking me to pull forward?"
Oh, that's a little aggressive even for me.
It was Josh, and he looks up at his clock over his head that's showing the numbers of how long my car is sitting in front of his drive-thru window, and then he looks at me again and he goes, "Sir, I'm just doing my job." And I think somewhere along the line, this management philosophy has gotten lost in translation, because I know that it is not their intent that when there's only one car in the drive-thru that you move them out from in front of the window so the number will stop counting.
Well, and here's the thing, too. If that's still the case, if somehow internal to McDonald's management practices, they're still looking at the number of how long that person is sitting in front of the window, then their system is entirely broken, and the people that are collecting this information and analyzing it are totally separated from reality.
Precisely. This is what we call a perverse incentive. They have now systematically created a situation where you get dissatisfied customers and worse customer service because of a thing that you're doing where the stated purpose is to provide better customer service.
And now, let's be clear. If the norm for this McDonald's that you were at was 90 customers a minute, if this place is hopping nonstop 24/7, that's one thing. But when it's completely dead, they still need to have procedures for the edge cases of okay, now just in case this never happens, but if there isn't anybody here, you have to do it a little different.
Right. And the intent for them of having the clock over the window ticking for how long I've been out there is for them to help me faster.
Well, yeah.
So ask me what I did. Ask me if I pulled forward.
Did you pull forward?
No, I did not pull forward.
I wouldn't have pulled forward either. That's ridiculous.
So he closed the window, and I heard them shouting inside, incredulously. And I was kind of looking to see if I could see what was going on. And I'm like, "Jairus, they're spitting on the burger. I totally know it. I don't know why. I should just pull forward. It's not worth it." And they handed out our food, and they'd given us cold fries.
Okay.
Serves us right.
Did you ask for new fries? Don't they have?
No.
Is that Wendy's or McDonald's
that
has
the
fries?
The confrontation had already happened, and I just wanted to get out of there. And once we finally got around to look at it, that's what we would have been waiting for. And they're like, "Fine, he wants to get out of here fast. Let's get him out of here fast." We were going to make him wait for warm fries. He's not getting warm fries out. So, perverse incentive achieved. Congratulations, McDonald's Corporation.
The entire fast food industry is such I don't know, you're taking your life in your own hands when you start messing with these fast food workers. Because these kids, like he said, he's just trying to do his job.
I'm just doing my job.
Yeah, but you and I, guys like you and me, realize kid, I know you're trying to do your job, but in you doing your job, you're having all of these other ramifications that are go all the way to the top, and you're the lowest level, and you're the person that I'm interacting with, and so therefore I have to blame you. They don't get that, and they don't care.
No.
All they care about is we're making their life a little harder, and so they're going to get back at us any way they can.
He's going to get chewed out by his manager because I sat at the window too long.
Yeah, because you sat at the window for 90 seconds. How dare you, Ben?
Yeah. All right. Well, that's interesting that you said you've softened your position on this. Is it because the monolith that is low-end, fast food service has kind of started to come around to actually being able to provide good service in this scenario, as opposed to just victimizing people with big orders?
Yes, the first thing that you said. So most of the restaurants, like the fast food places that I go to, most of them don't do this. They still don't do this mostly because they don't have the physical space to have anybody pull around and wait. But like I said, there was the one McDonald's in our town that was remodeled specifically for this thing. And that was the restaurant that I originally had the really bad experience with when I pulled forward the first time. But it's been such a normal occurrence and a procedural and a training thing. It's clear that every new employee goes in there, gets this briefing, because now it's just a thing that they do, and they're pretty efficient at it. And so I don't have a lot of complaints. The only complaint that I do have is the one time that I did pull around. I had ordered like that the 40 nugget meal or whatever, waiting for a football game to start. And so then I'm sitting in spot number 2, and there's somebody sitting in spot number 1. And then this, one of the workers comes out with this tray full of food and then hands a bag into car in spot number 1. And that person, this total stranger, opens the bag, roots their grubby, disgusting fingers through it, and then hands it back to this person. I'm like, no, they didn't. And then it comes around to me. It's like, here you go. Here's your bag. And now I've got to make the choice. I'm like, okay, that's great. Go remake it.
Do I tell him to go back inside and remake it?
Because this disgusting person, who I don't know from Adam,
That's a great dilemma. That is a really good dilemma. Am I willing to accept the molestation of my food, or basically start over from zero and have a pissed off fast food employee?
I don't know. I don't know what the right answer there is. What I did, what I chose to do in this scenario is I figured, okay, well, the only thing that they messed up was the fries, so I just didn't eat any of the fries.
Oh.
I let my kids eat all my fries. Here you go, kids, extra fries.
You and I have a very similar calculus about this kind of thing. I'm just like, well, okay, that was my trade-off. That was the thing I was willing to accept as opposed to the alternative.
I don't know. I mean, it's a trade-off for us because we can identify these situations, but this is not the first time that I see in the world. It's like, okay, you people have set up 2 completely logical systems, but because of the way you set them up, they overlap in certain places. That is terrible. Yeah. Like when last episode, we talked about these birthday places, and this birthday place was great, and they had this ropes course for all these little 5 and 6-year-old kids to be like.
But it was right over the top of where you were eating.
It was right over the food area, and I'm like, do you know what kind of crap rains down from 5 and 6-year-olds constantly? Like, I don't want them walking over my uncovered pizza.
The chain of events for them to build a bigger facility or convert some of that floor space that's bringing them in more money to solve the problem you just described is pretty bad. Like, it would have to have somebody fly over the top and something fall off of them into food, and somebody get sick because of it, and then there'd be a lawsuit, and then they'd be like, okay, we'll move the food court out from underneath the ropes course.
Oh, I don't think that would have to happen. I think it would just be one 5-year-old sock coming down and landing flat on the middle of somebody's pizza before they realized, oh, this is an issue.
Yeah, and the interim is they just put I don't know, crime scene tape around the eating area that's underneath the ropes course for a while.
Nah, I already solved the problem. Patio umbrellas, just like outdoor eating facilities.
But they want the people sitting there eating to see the kids flying overhead and think how fun that is and want to stop eating and go play on that.
Well, I didn't say the entire surface would be covered, just the table where the food would be.
Yeah. All right. Well, sir, I'm just doing my job. All right, Josh, let's do a bad at technology.
Okay.
Last time I talked about these websites and apps that basically assist you in doing things that we used to do in a very analog way, like bringing food to someone that's sick or setting up a potluck or those kinds of things. And so I'd mentioned one by name Meal Train. And it's funny because I didn't plan it this way, but the week after you and I recorded our last episode and talked about that, one of my NCOs that worked for me, one of my non-commissioned officers, his wife had twins.
Oh, congratulations.
And yeah, I'm so happy for him. And they'd only moved to our unit about a month before, and when I contacted him after they had the baby, he basically revealed to me that they were very far from family, that they don't have any friends in the area, and they have no support structure. And I was thinking, what could I do to help these guys in their time of need?
You saw an opportunity to put your money where your mouth was.
So I set up this meal train, and I think for the first week after the family got back from the hospital, somebody went over every night and brought them food, and they got a couple of contributions and gifts from it, and it was really easy.
So my question is for you, Ben. Did you tell them that you set up this meal train before you did it, or did they just have strangers delivering them food for a week?
Yeah, I told them, and okay. So I only was talking about it hypothetically, but when I actually went through it, I had to learn all the things about it. So let me tell you about it. You have to basically tell the person that's the key person there, so they'll get notified of what's going to happen, when someone's coming over, what time. It also gives them an opportunity to notify us of things like, for instance, they lived on the military installation, so whoever was helping needed to be able to have access to the base. Or what time of day to come, or if they had food allergies or anything like that. So him and I just interacted. I put all that into the website. I gave my contact information, his contact information, set up the parameters, and then sent it out to people, and it filled up with all the stuff. And as far as overhead on me, it was pretty low. As far as if I had tried to do that thing the old way in the old time, where I was trying to get people to sign up to bring food over to their house and pass on all those details, it would have been a lot, and it was easy.
Yeah, back in the day, you would have been glued to the kitchen with that phone on the wall that had that super long cord on it, with your Rolodex trying to flip through and figure out who's got access to the base and who's going to take care of Tuesday.
So I signed up for one of the nights, and I went over there on that night, and I sat down with them for a minute, just dropped off the food, made some polite conversation, saw the babies, talked about how cute they were. I gave them a little gift that I'd gotten, and I asked about the babies' names because they'd had fraternal twins that they named Aiden and Tallulah. I'm like, oh, those are unique names. How do you pick those names? And he said, oh, that's an interesting story. We used an app. And I said, what? And he said, it's called, it's called Baby Name. The problem that we have is my wife likes unique, interesting names, and I like traditional old-style names, and we were having trouble coming to a compromise. So what we do is her and I both get the app, we link up in the app, and then it just gives you baby names, and like Tinder, you swipe left or you swipe right. And then when you get a match, it notifies you it notifies you that you've got a match, and then you have a name that you both like.
Oh, geez. So it just...
It's Tinder for baby names.
Oh, my goodness gracious. It's Tinder for baby names, but just with your significant other, the person that you're having a baby with.
Yeah, just one person. You're trying to find out where your Venn diagram of baby names overlaps. And since they had twins, and one was a boy and one was a girl, this is a problem. And they did this, and the app spit out two names that they both liked, and that's what they named the kids.
I need this app for picking a restaurant at the end of the day.
Maybe it's a thing. I don't know. I
now want a whole page of apps on my phone that just replace conversations that I would otherwise have to have with my wife.
Yeah. Okay. What we need to design it. What are we going to call it?
Oh, we're going to call it
Marriage Saver.
I don't care. There's this whatever. Like Marriage Saver is probably a good one.
Because that's what you're trying to do. You're trying to take two people and without causing an argument, find out where their Venn diagrams overlap.
Yeah. Yes, I completely agree. So Tinder for baby names. That's solid. What's the actual name of the app?
It's called Baby Name.
Oh, I completely glossed over that because I just latched onto the Tinder for baby names.
Yeah. So, listeners, if you're struggling to try to name your baby, try the Baby Name app. Baby Name, please sponsor the podcast and let us know. I'm interested to hear if that works out for you. All right, Josh, for Battle Logic this week, we are going to conclude our series of logic, and next time we're going to transition to something new I'll talk about in just a minute. So how last time you talked about your top 3 biases, this time I'm going to talk about my top 3 fallacies.
Hit me.
So in no particular order, I have the fallacy, presuming that a claim has been poorly argued or fallacy has been made that it is necessarily wrong.
Yeah, I fall victim to this one a lot. Like, I like to point out, like, haha, you have included a bias or logical fallacy in your argument, therefore, the entire thing is moot, and I win by default.
Right, and just because someone uses bad logic doesn't mean that they're wrong.
Yeah, using a logical fallacy in an argument doesn't mean they hit it out of bounds. Like, the argument still continues.
Right. Number 2 is ad hominem. Ad hominem is Latin, which means against the man, also known as name-calling or personal attack. You have no idea what you're talking about. You've only been here for 6 months. That actually is not relevant to whether or not someone knows what they're talking about.
Yes, and you can always tell when somebody doesn't have a good comeback to whatever it is you're trying to talk to them about when they switch the topic to complaining about you personally.
Yeah, I wish it worked like this magic bullet. It'd be like, oh, I see you switched to an ad hominem attack.
Well,
you don't have any way to refute my claim.
And that's the fallacy, right? It's like, right. Oh, well, you're just dumb. It's like, haha, you have just admitted that I won the argument because you have nothing else to say. Thank you for that.
That doesn't work either.
Yeah.
And my third one is the gambler's fallacy. And this is kind of a favorite of mine because I just like to point out, it came up this week, the believing that runs occurred, statistically independent phenomena such as roulette wheel spins. The classic example is like when you flip a coin. You know, if you flip 5 heads in a row, it doesn't change the odds of whether or not the coin's going to come up heads or tails on the next flip.
There's an even more classic example of this that you'll appreciate, Ben. I'm going to quote it verbatim. You ready?
Yeah.
Ugh, those first few hundred bites of dirt were not so good. Maybe the next one will be better.
Link in the show notes. Thanks, Stinko Man. All right, for Bad at English this week, Josh, I want to do something I have not done before, and that is I'm going to issue a correction on a Bad at English segment.
What?
Yeah, so last week I talked about how the British would order a Coca-Cola and they would request a full-fat Coke as a cheeky way to say that they wanted the original recipe sugar as the main ingredient.
As opposed to Diet Coke or Coke Zero.
Right. And full fat actually is not a reference to the fact that it's fattening, and that's better or worse than the diet iteration of it. Full fat is a reference to the way that they refer to how they pasteurize and process milk.
Okay.
In America, we use a different word for it. Do you know what we call basically milk that's only pasteurized but no changes have been made to the fat content of the milk?
That's whole milk.
Right, whole milk. Well, in England, they don't call it whole milk. In the United Kingdom, they don't call it whole milk. They call it full fat milk.
Ah, okay.
So the term full fat there is a modifier used to basically mean unmodified.
Oh, so it's not full fat, and I want the unhealthy version. They said it's full fat, and it's the original version.
Yes, that you haven't taken anything away from it.
That's a really weak sauce correction. I like the version that you gave us last week better.
Yeah, but it just didn't sit with me right. So I went back and I looked it up and I realized that this falls into a category of things, and I found about 6 other examples where the British naturally have adopted something as part of their lexicon and the Americans change it because it's uncomfortable. So why don't we call it full fat milk? It was called that, it's not like milk is a new invention. It's because that sounds kind of weird. So we change it to whole milk. WHOLE.
Because this is America, land of the free and home of the correct advertising.
Euphemism.
We're trying to sell
some marketing guru on the American Milk, the Dairy Farmers Association said, how can we sell more whole milk? Instead of calling it full fat milk, let's call it whole milk and make them feel like they're getting the whole thing. Right?
Yeah, I'm getting all the milk.
So I was thinking back to my trips to the British supermarket, and I was thinking, what other things like this were there? So there was clotted cream.
Okay.
Doesn't that sound awful? Clotted cream?
Clotted cream sounds like cottage cheese almost.
Yeah. And isn't it interesting how the term cottage cheese sounds like homey and like it's gone through a focus board, but clotted cream just sounds like what does that look like to you? It looks like clotted cream.
Wait, am I right? It was clotted cream?
No,
actually?
It's not cottage cheese.
Oh.
It has the exact same fat content as butter, but because they don't churn it, they just separate it. It's like butter, but it tastes more like milk.
Isn't that just buttermilk? I'm so confused now.
No. It's like butter, but it doesn't taste buttery. You can spread it on your bread, and it's white.
So margarine. It's like margarine.
No, it's clotted cream. It's its own thing.
I can't go to the store and get clotted cream, Ben. I don't know what you're talking about.
You have to go to England. All right, well, let's pick one you can go to the store and get. They call sour cream soured cream with a D on the end.
Now, this is interesting. This seems to be an exception to our own rule because sour cream doesn't seem like something that you would ever want to buy at the grocery store.
Right, but when we call it sour cream, S-O-U-R, with no E-D on the end, it just sounds like it's cream that's whole and beautiful and wonderful, but is slightly sour, as opposed to soured cream that sounds like it's gone off. It's spoiled.
I don't know. I still feel like sour cream is just like, oh, this is the cream that sat in the grocery store and didn't get sold. So then we put it in a new tin and now it's sour cream.
They call baked potatoes a jacket potato.
What?
I don't know. Maybe the Idaho potato growers got together and said that doesn't sell potatoes. Let's call them baked potatoes instead of jacket potatoes.
Jacket potatoes? What
jacket potato.
What is that? That doesn't even make any sense.
If you go to a restaurant and order a baked potato, they'll look at you funny. If you order a jacket potato, they'll bring you what we call a baked potato.
Well, first of all, you shouldn't be ordering baked potatoes
right.
Well, I'm immediately recanting that because we're talking about Britain, and so unseasoned potatoes is a staple of their diet.
Okay. Here's an interesting one that is very contextual, and that is squash. Squash is a thing. It almost has its own aisle in the grocery store where you can buy like 1 liter or 2 liter bottles that have concentrated fruit juice.
Oh, I thought you meant like actual gourds that
No,
you buy.
not the vegetable.
Okay.
And they also eat the vegetable, and they call it squash. But when they say squash, and they're referring to concentrated fruit juice. Now, here's a mistake newcomers to England sometimes make. If you go to the store and you see this aisle of what they call squash, it looks like just juice in a bottle, but it's at about a 50% concentrate level. So if you just pour it and drink it straight, it's really, really strong. It's
Oh,
intended to be diluted
yeah.
before you drink it.
So it's like those frozen cylinders that you had as a
Yes,
kid,
yes.
where you would
We
pour it out
freeze them,
into a
and
pitcher. Yeah.
yes. But our euphemism, of course, you can't go anywhere in an American supermarket and find squash. You would get fruit juice concentrate, which sounds much nicer.
I beg to differ, sir. I can go into any American supermarket, ask for squash, and get a gourd. Exactly what I asked for.
Another one is mince. If you go to a British supermarket and you ask for mince, they will give you ground beef.
Okay.
Even though you can also order a mince pie, which has like that stuff made out of green tomatoes and raisins. And
Ugh.
they just know contextually which one you're talking about. But yeah. So mince got renamed ground beef. And the last one I want to point out that there's no clean analog for, like clotted cream, and that is crackers or cookies they call digestibles. Have you ever seen a digestible?
Digestible. I would hope
Yeah.
most of their food is digestible. If you have to
Doesn't that
put that
it's a
on.
terrible name. It's a terrible name for food. It's the reason we don't sell them. But to them, it's just ordinary to call something a digestible. Yes, it's digestible. It's a round biscuit that's similar to a graham cracker, kind of plain brown cookie.
Well,
But
graham
they call them
crackers aren't
biscuits.
biscuits. Yeah, they call cookies biscuits, but I'm not calling like even by the British definition of a biscuit, a graham cracker isn't a biscuit. A graham cracker is its own thing.
Yeah, well, you can't buy graham crackers over there, but you can get digestibles.
Ben, that analogy right there, you trying to explain digestibles to me was like 4 orders of magnitude deep into British like terminology that I still don't get. Like just
Yeah, well, so if you want to make a British s'more, to bring this full circle and really give it the Bad at Magic podcast flavor, if you want to make a British s'more, you have to buy the digestibles that are dipped in chocolate, and then get one of their weird overly large marshmallows and roast it over a fire that'll probably taste funny, and then stick it between 2 of those digestibles and eat it, and that's the closest you can get to a s'more.
I still blows my mind that like one of the selling points for food in Britain is digestible. Like that's like of all the
But
words.
they don't think of it like that. The word gets abstracted away. It just means a brown dry biscuit.
That's apparently edible by humans.
They don't look at that word and think, oh, that means if I eat it, I will be able to get nutrients out of it and not die. Like,
All right, so there are some things I'm glad that maybe advertising has taken over. Whole milk versus I don't remember the full fat
full
milk.
fat.
Yeah, whatever. But graham cracker versus digestible. I'm on board with graham crackers.
Oh, good. I'm glad my last one finally hit home. Segment success complete. Well, Josh, since I had all my family together this week and we were trying out new things, of course, I tried out a new board game. So I want to tell you about a game called Space Base. Have you ever played it?
I have not.
First of all, there's something to be said about a name that simple and elegant. It's not like, the Alduvian conundrum. It's just Space Base.
I mean,
Now,
it says a lot about the game right there. I'm assuming that it's some kind of base construction in space.
Yes, that's exactly it. If you want to give it a genre, and I'm not well versed in game subgenres, I think it's like a machine construction. You're basically trying to build a machine that generates victory points and get to the highest number of victory points before your opponents.
Okay.
It's very similar in mechanics to the game Splendor, which we've talked about on the podcast before.
Okay.
If you remember, that one's themed around being like a person who makes jewelry, and you have to begin by first digging in the earth for gems and then cutting them and refining them and then building them into jewelry and selling them. And so in the early game, you're trying to generate raw resources. In the mid game, you're trying to build infrastructure. In the late game, you're trying to liquidate your assets and be wealthy before your opponents.
Okay.
Space Base is that, but in space.
It gets the sci-fi flair to it.
One thing I love about the game Splendor is it's really easy to pick up. The pieces are big and chunky. They're not complicated. There's no words. It's just pictures and graphics, and even my mom will play that game. Space Base is like if you ever played Splendor and you're like, this isn't quite complicated enough for me.
I want to take this to the next level.
Yeah. So if you ever played Splendor or you love Splendor and you're interested in tacking a sci-fi theme with a little bit more complexity on top, at the heart of it, the mechanic is simply about rolling a dice and the mathematical possibilities of rolling 2d6s.
It's amazing how many games are built on 2d6.
Yeah, so you have a board on you in front of you with the numbers 1 to 12 on it, and you basically have to build infrastructure on those where you're trying to get things. And of course, the rewards on cards that happen at 1 or 12 are much higher. It's a risk reward trade-off than if you build things at 6 and 7, which are most likely occur but aren't, as beneficial. So, or balance it. You decide.
More gambling. That's just all it is.
It's got randomness, but it has strategy. It rewards different types of gameplay. Sometimes you can spike one. It has combos because there's decisions and interaction that happen on top. And my son had this great combo where he basically just had 3 good things happen in rapid succession. He accelerated way into the late game ahead of everyone else and won while we were all still in phase 1.
See, that's not fair. If there's no catch-up mechanic or there's nothing that's going to bog him down, then like you can get random variants like that, and then it becomes a non-game at that point.
Yeah, my daughter-in-law was kind of mad about it, but that is one of the negatives about that kind of game. But for him, it was really exciting. He came up with a cool combo that rewarded his ingenuity, and there's definitely nothing like that in Splendor.
It's interesting. That sounds a lot like a game I've played called Terraforming Mars. Have you ever played that?
They played that game. I didn't get in on it. They tried to get me in on it. They're listeners to this podcast, and they are laughing and pointing at their player at me right now because you brought that up unprompted.
I brought it up unprompted, but here's what I'm going to say about Terraforming Mars. Terraforming Mars is a board game built by a Magic player that was sick of people beating him before he got to put together his 15-card combo.
Yeah, they said it takes about 2 hours.
Yeah, the game is fun, don't get me wrong, but like you have a leg up if you understand like the multiple interactions that can take place, and that's what it is. Like you have to achieve points, and you're talking about kind of like the game you're talking about. You build little machines or little cycles or combos to generate these points, and you're literally just building Magic the Gathering combos on the fly as fast as possible.
All right. Well, Space Base, the whole game can be over in about 20 minutes. You can play with as few as 2 or as many as, I think, 7 or 8 players. Thumbs up recommended. How about Terraforming Mars?
I'm going to give Terraforming Mars like a 7 out of 10. I like the concept and it's very interesting. I have a bad taste in my mouth because the couple times I played it, it was for people that had never played the game before versus somebody that has like every expansion for it. And just... it's never fun when your first experience with a game is getting pounded into the dirt like just so thoroughly that you get up and walk away 3/4 of the way through the game because you're just not having fun anymore.
Yeah. Yeah, I'd like to get into that discussion on the ethics of being that person, but we'll save that for another time.
I wrote an article on our website years ago, and I said one of the important things when you're introducing people to a new game is let them win the first couple.
Great recommendation. Link in the show notes to Josh's article on badatmagic.live. All right, listeners, if you've listened to the Bad at Magic podcast for any amount of time, you know that one thing we do on the Bad at Magic podcast is spoil movies and television shows in the Star Wars universe. I would like to issue the strongest possible warning that we can give here on the Bad at Magic podcast for Star Wars Andor.
Listen, we say spoilers for Star Wars a lot. This time we're actually going to spoil Star Wars. So, like, be warned.
Yeah. All right. So you've been warned. Josh, have you finally watched Andor?
Yes, Ben. After being bombarded from, I feel like, every side. Like, there was, seriously, in my life, there was mounting pressure
Josh,
from multiple vectors that were telling me, you must consume Andor.
Josh,
And
when you are a self-professed nerd and you have a podcast about games, life, and other things, there are certain responsibilities that you have in life.
I've made my case. Like there was this.
You're like, man,
There was an
I
intersection
watched
of so
this
many
with my
things that were
son, and there's
preventing
only
me.
so much time in the week that I can do this. Nope. Okay, I'm interested in knowing, maybe even before we start, how your son did. Because if there's one thing I want to say about Star Wars Andor, it may be the very first Star Wars movie or TV show that is not for kids.
No, not at all. And there was multiple times because it's very political. It's very intriguey. It feels in some parts it feels like a heist movie. Some parts it feels like a spy thriller. And there was multiple times where they were having like euphemistic, metaphorical discussions. Like they're saying one thing, but they're clearly talking about other things that are happening and with heavy implication and stuff. And we'd watch this whole scene play out like multiple minutes, and then my son would go, "What were they just talking about?" And like I would just have to tell him, "Don't worry about it. It's politics or something." Like because it's unimportant to what he wants from the plot.
Okay, so and it was a little bit sparse on action. Did he make it through all 12 episodes?
He did. He made it through all 12 episodes, and there was there was enough cool Star Warsy stuff that he liked all of the episodes. But
nary a Jedi or a lightsaber to be found.
You are going so fast through all of the things that I want to talk about. Stop.
Okay. All right. Well, let's lay down some ground rules here, because what I want to do is I want to talk about the 4 acts or 3 acts, depending on how you divide it up. I want to talk about the characters, and then I would talk about the significance of this in the broader Star Wars universe.
Okay.
So let's start with the acts, the plot. Do you mind if I give a little bit of like meta kind of stuff, like I do sometimes?
I thought that's our normal gig. Is you do the meta stuff, and I do like the plot synopsis.
All right. So Tony Gilroy, the writer of this property, I don't know how Disney got this one so right, but you probably know his work best in the Jason Bourne movies. He wrote the scripts for the Jason Bourne movies.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yes. When Disney greenlighted this and gave it a giant budget, it was meant to be one of the tentpole properties of their darling Star Wars that they paid $4 billion to George Lucas for to get people to want to sign up for and stay on Disney Plus. Like everybody already had all the DVDs in their library. What's going to bring them into the streaming service and pay the monthly fee? This is supposed to be it. So they're spending a lot of money on this, and they hired the best talent. They had 4 directors, or 3 directors really, that directed these 12 episodes in basically 3 episode chunks. So Toby Haynes directed the first 3, Ben Karen the second 3, Susanna White the third 3, and then Toby Haynes directed the last 3. Now, one interesting thing this did is it made it have a feel. Even though there were 12 episodes that were all related to the same character and the same overarching plot that was happening, it had the feel of like chapters. And it wasn't just in the differences in the story. It looked and felt different as we moved through this story.
I can agree with that. And honestly, having the multiple directors like explains some of the shifting that I felt. That like I could tell something was off and different, but I didn't know that there was different directors. That explains a lot of it.
The scope of this was massive. There were 200 named characters and over 6,000 extras. The sets were massive. The main set in Ferrix is like 5 city blocks that they constructed for this.
Wow.
Oh yeah. And there's scenes, where they run the length of the whole thing. There's parades, and you really feel like you get to know it by the end. It goes to Coruscant. It goes to some planet I can't remember the name of where there's a prison. It goes to Canary. There's this vacation planet, and you spend a lot of time at the Imperial Security Bureau headquarters, which we've never done before in the Star Wars universe, which is awesome. I can't wait to talk about that.
Yes.
From the background point of view, they started filming in late 2019 and intended to film, for like 8 to 9 months, and it ran right smack dab into the COVID-19 outbreak.
Which is a problem when you're trying to film something that has 6,000 extras.
Right. So through a lot of, hard work and lots of precautions and screening, they were able to push it through and get it into production so it come along. Some of it was shot on location, like the dam was way in the Scottish Highlands, which was awesome. I was tired of Tunisia. Like, thank you. We've had enough things set in on Tatooine.
And this is right there. Like that point that you just made is I'm gonna beat that drum the entire time we're talking about Andor. But go ahead.
Okay, this is Star Wars for adults. What is it really like to be under a totalitarian regime? What might incentivize you to cooperate with them or rebel against them? What is your day-to-day life like? What kind of problems come up? How does that divide people? How does it affect local governments and businesses?
Uh, yeah, I mean, this is like you said, nary a lightsaber or a space wizard to be seen. And this is like the common man's Star Wars. This is what Star Wars would be for just, Joe Schmo, guy on the street. What does it actually mean to live under the Empire? And a lot of times they even mention some places it's like it's completely transparent. It's like it's a flag that gets raised on a building and nobody cares. Everybody just goes on with their life. In other places, it's a complete game changer. So I will say I'm big on this podcast when we talk about Star Wars that I'm never truly convinced that the Empire is the bad guy. There's a handful of bad dudes that are working.
There's a lot of grayness here in this property, isn't there?
In Andor, it makes me feel a lot more like, okay, there are some systemic problems that we really need to address with the Empire, and that's as hard against the Empire as I'm going to go with this one.
Okay, this Andor flew a little bit below my radar. I got to be honest, Josh. I wasn't like waiting for it the day it came out. I still had Obi-Wan on my mind, and I love Ewan McGregor and Hayden Christensen and Darth Vader and all that, but it was just kind of mishandled. It was like they were relying on fan service so much that they forgot to actually tell a compelling story.
Or it's just, like you just run into the problems that you have when you're trying to tell a long episodic story about two space wizards with near infinite power.
Yeah, and like you said, they were just coming up with these artificial, incomprehensible reasons to take them all and lift them from one location to another without actually having a plot reason to do so. And it just felt contrived, and I was a bit fatigued. I was a bit Star Wars fatigued. So I was so relieved when Andor came out and I finally started watching it to find out that there is still room for artistry in the Star Wars universe.
Oh, and this is we've talked about this on this podcast. Star Wars universe is big enough to tell stories that aren't about these big names. There's so much room to get down into the details and tell us. Ben, I'll tell you right now. One of the I don't know how much detail you want to go into all the different episodes, but one of my favorite characters in this whole series, and like I don't even care. It's the freaking lawful neutral deputy inspector guy from the corporate security office that we get introduced to in like episode 1 and 2.
Yeah, his name's Cyril Karn.
Yes, Cyril, that guy, like, just like something bad happened on my watch and I'm going to get it done. And then his jaded, cynical superior who's been around the block enough times, like, saw all the indicators of like, this has all the indicators of being a huge pain in my butt. So we're going to sweep this whole thing under the rug and don't you dare investigate this thing. But then the deputy director's just like, that is against the rules and it will not stand. And I just loved him to death for that.
Okay, good. Let's talk about that. So our main character is Cassian Andor. He is, where would you put him on an alignment chart?
Oh,
at the beginning, because he changes.
Chaotic neutral. Like
chaotic neutral.
Yeah.
He's a thief.
Yeah. He's a rogue. He's a mercenary. He's just out for himself. Like we're introduced to him in episode 1, and he's in debt to a ton of people for a ton of different reasons. Smooth talks his way through every confrontation that we see him get into. Like he's what Han Solo is supposed to be.
Except for one. We have this mysterious backstory that's going to unfold as this season unravels, and he goes into what turns out to be a brothel, which floored me, Josh. I'm like, what? This is a brothel in the Star Wars universe? Like, usually it's just some vague bar where they order drinks.
No, this was very clearly a brothel with Twi'leks, which is top notch. You know it's a good place when they got Twi'leks on the menu.
Right. So he goes into this brothel, and he says he's looking for his sister. Now, I don't know that I feel like I understand that, having watched all 12 episodes. They show his sister in the flashbacks to his childhood planet, but they did not. That plot thread is still flapping in the breeze.
All right, so if we're going to put a footnote here for a second, this is one of several things that it feels like they're setting up for future seasons. They are things that they introduce that are not paid off by the end of the 12-episode arc. That makes me feel somewhat dissatisfied, but hopeful that they'll be able to explore that more in the future.
Yes. So he's in this brothel, and he gets into a confrontation because he's not willing to defer to a couple of thugs from the what do they call them? The corporation?
Yeah, it's a corporation planet. This corporation has jurisdiction and basically owns this planet. Everybody that's on that planet works for the corporation, does the corporation's bidding, and they have full control over what happens there.
So they're in this bar. He's looking for his sister, but in the process of him finding out that she's not there, he kind of infuriates them. He leaves by himself. They chase him down. A confrontation ensues.
Well, it was
he
total.
uses his wily thief
Yeah.
and overpowers them, and they end up dead.
Well, so this was all right. So first of all, this was the first thing that told me that this was going to be a legit Star Wars thing, is because these two security guards were hanging out in this brothel, and they were just picking a fight because he was just like looking in their direction. They're like, "What are you looking at?" And then he's just the kind of guy that's not going to back down from that. Like these bullies, like pushing their weight around. And when he leaves, they're doing the same thing. They're just pushing their weight around. It's like, oh, looks like you're out of bounds or whatever. And they're just being jerks about it. And he's not supposed to be there. He doesn't want anybody to know that he was there. And so he overpowers the one. And one of the guys ends up accidentally getting shot. And this is the key thing that I thought was super important.
Yes.
One of the two guards is accidentally killed. And then the other guard immediately starts talking, like coming up with a story like, it was an accident. You were never here. Like, we were struggling. We'll go in together and we'll explain it, because it's like, it's so clear.
No, there's this beautiful moment where he looks like he's going to start threatening him, and then he realizes this guy might kill me, and I need to give him an out.
More than that, it's both parties realize that there is no scenario where the second guard doesn't also have to die to cover the butt of the guy that just accidentally shot the other guard.
Yes.
And so the guy, he's desperately reaching for tufts of grass as he's falling off this cliff to like, you don't necessarily have to kill me here, even though we both know you do.
Audience, I want to emphasize this moment. Like Josh said, if you don't feel gripped in this moment, I guess this whole thing isn't for you. But it is so gripping. This moment where he's holding the gun pointed at the second guy, and he now realizes he's the only witness to this crime he's just committed, and they both come to the realization that he's got to kill him.
And this is the thing, is like, they don't spoon feed it to you. Like, the dialogue makes it clear that that's what both people realize, but like, you have to come to the same realization with the characters. Like, oh, this guy has to die. And like, it felt like the show was treating me like a grown-up, and I very much appreciate that.
Yes. So you mentioned a second ago how Cyril Karn, who now is the deputy inspector on this planet, has gotten wind of these two dead guys and is trying to investigate what happened to them. And from his perspective, where would you put Cyril on an alignment chart?
I mentioned already, he is lawful neutral. Like, it's
Lawful
not good
neutral.
or bad, he's just following the rules.
He's just following the rules. And he is basically confronted by his supervisor, the inspector of the station, who realizes that this is going to be a big problem. Now, this is what I love so much about Andor. It's like they imagined, what if we had a guy who'd been here for a long time, from before the Empire was in power, and now is just trying to find a way to get along with the Empire in power.
Well, he's clear. Like, this is the penultimate version of, I'm going to retire in 3 months. Like, that's this guy's whole thing.
Yes.
It's like,
I just don't want any trouble.
He's been working this job forever, and he was so pragmatic in what he was talking about, because the guy comes in, Cyril comes in, and is like, we have 2 dead guards, we must investigate.
Okay,
the guy goes,
Josh, I love it so much I wrote it down, so I want to read it.
Go for it.
Okay, so the inspector says, I want you to conjure a suitable accident. And Cyril goes, but they were murdered.
But then, yes, and it's the justification that the superior comes up with that I just love so much. He's like, yeah, we had 2 guys. Did you write this part down too?
Yes. Oh. No. They were killed in a fight. They were in a brothel that we're not supposed to have. The expensive one that they shouldn't be able to afford. Drinking Revnog, which we're not supposed to allow. Both of them supposedly on the job, which is a dismissible offense. They clearly harassed the wrong human with dark features and chose the wrong person to annoy. Then he goes into the mode, basically coaching Cyril on what to do here. He says, I suspect they died rushing to aid someone in distress. Nothing too heroic. We don't need a parade. They died being helpful. Something inspiring and sad, but in a mundane sort of way. You look stricken, Deputy Inspector. Are you absorbing my meaning here?
Yes, that whole scene, I was on the edge of my couch. Is like, I love the conflict that I am seeing between the bright-eyed and bushy-tailed lawful neutral, like I'm just gonna uphold the law no matter the consequences, versus the guy that has been there and done that and is just like, listen, everything is gonna be a whole lot better for everyone if we just lay it out like this.
And the actors are so good. Like,
Yes.
Cyril just really looks like, I may have felt at points in my career, like you always say, I wanted to draw my flaming sword.
Ben,
Cyril, you could see him wanting to draw his flaming sword here. He says, trying, sir. And he says, I'm on my way to give a speech to the Empire on crime rates. And the goal of that speech, should you ever be asked to deliver it, is brevity.
This is... all right, so I'm not going to lie, Ben. I very much like Cyril as a character because I very, very much identified with Cyril as a character. Like, he walked in and his uniform is like perfectly tailored with like some
The boss
extra...
points that out. He's like, have you tailored your uniform?
He's like, maybe. Added a little piping on the... And he did. Like, he had like some... Just a little bit of extra like outlining and stuff just to make it look more spiffy. Like, the guy loved what he did so much. And he just... But he was just... He couldn't get it. He just couldn't get it through his head.
Okay, the quality of that interaction and the dialogue just let me know that this was something different. This was not Obi-Wan. This was not Boba Fett. This was something I wasn't ready for, and I was so excited. After that, Josh, I was just on the edge of my seat for all 12 episodes.
All right, so I was too. All right, so Ben, I'm not going to lie to you. That scene, I felt like wrote some checks that they couldn't cash. Because, well, by the... Spoilers, everyone. We've already done this, but like that whole plot line with Cyril, like we follow Cyril. I'm going to abbreviate this very quickly. He does a full investigation. It goes very poorly, as predicted by the other guy. The Empire gets involved, gets everyone fired, and then now we're following...
And like 5 people die.
Yeah, and we're now following Cyril in his civilian life, trying to put things back together, where he now works for the Department of Weights and Measures, which is just perfect. I love that so much. Like, his job...
Just a giant room full of people doing depressing calculations that they should give to droids, but droids are more expensive than humans.
And he's sitting at this cubicle, and it was a fuel quality control or something. It was so great. And but in his spare time, he's constantly trying to like dump information or talk to people at the ISB. The freaking
he can't
Empire
let it go.
Yeah,
the lawful part of his personality can't let it go.
There's a guy that killed 2 guys on this planet, and he's not going to get away with it. So he starts going to what is essentially the CIA and like sending all of these nutso letters, like, you've got to track down this guy. I've got all this insider information who's being quashed, and like he just seems like a nut job. But like there's a point in the show where it seems like one of the ISB inspectors is actually going to take him seriously for a second, and she tells him, "You're a crazy person. Shut up. I never want to see you again." And like, I'm waiting for the payoff for Cyril. I'm wanting Cyril to get into the ISB and like to finally fulfill that role that he is just made
like
for.
The Empire needs someone like him.
Yes.
They want someone that's going to follow the rules no matter what, ruthlessly.
Man, he would like our inspector person that we're following, the female. I forget her name. I'm sure you have it written down.
Yeah, it is Deidre Miro.
Deidre, yes. So we have Deidre, who's also a little unorthodox, but also very gung-ho in her investigation, keeping the Empire safe. I feel like Cyril is her perfect protege. He is her perfect attack dog. Like, Cyril, go scorch that planet to the ground until you figure out what happened here, and he would do it. But we end the series, or this season, with Cyril still in his
plot thread unresolved.
He's still in his depressing civilian job. He's spending his own money for flights to other planets to try to investigate this crap on his own for no reason. And I'm just so dissatisfied with where Cyril is right now.
What did you think of the character of Cyril's mother?
This is the thing, is it kept coming back. It was like episode 7 or 8 when I started questioning, like, out loud with the people I'm watching, like, why are we even watching these interactions? Like, it's just reinforcing this idea that Cyril's life is very annoying. Like that.
Okay, I got a theory about this.
Okay.
When you're writing this sprawling epic and you have one protagonist, but you want to fill out the runtime with depth and other plot threads, you have to have more named characters with other conflicts that we care about, and they're not all going to be a hit for everyone.
I mean, I get what they were trying to do. I guess it makes it like it just reinforces this idea that Cyril is in this completely almost meaningless existence, and his only tie to these bigger events that are happening is this one thing that happened to him at one point that he's desperately trying to cling to.
Yeah, I don't know. I like the character of his mother because she kind of gives a bit of narration about how he's trying to claw his way up through the empire and he hasn't been able to do it on his own merits. And so he's trying to call in favors with relatives. And you can also see maybe why he is the way that he is because she's kind of henpecky and overbearing.
I did like seeing inside the apartment. Like, what does it look like when you're a low-level bureaucrat in the Empire?
Right.
What is your lifestyle
You
like?
drink cereal with blue milk on it.
Yeah, and you live in like a 2-room apartment, and you just kind of have a mediocre existence.
Yeah. Yeah, and it did answer some of those questions. And I like that they built all those sets. It just gave it so much richness and depth. Okay, so let's zoom out again. So we've got Cassian Andor, who is our main character. We're supposed to go into this knowing that he already has a destiny in the Star Wars universe. Now, I want to take back something I said when we reviewed Obi-Wan and The Mandalorian, and that is that it makes it dull to tell a story about a character when you already know their fate. I was wrong.
Well,
this story was interesting, and we already knew this character's fate. So it's something else.
Well, I mean, we know Andor's fate. We know that he dies in the Rogue One movie, like right before the the events of A New Hope. But that doesn't. Here's the thing: he was so unimportant in that movie and so not fleshed out that it's almost like it's like a footnote. It's like, oh, by the way, this guy dies at the end. That could be 20 years from now. We're just not going to tell you.
So I think they kind of tell, or fans just work it out, that this occurs. Do you know how Star Wars fans reckon time in the Star Wars universe?
Oh, I don't actually.
Okay, basically the destruction of the Death Star, or that battle, becomes year 0, and everything after that is ABY, after the Battle of Yavin, and everything before that is BBY, before the Battle of Yavin.
So this is what, 5 or 6 years BBY?
Yes, this is 5 BBY. Okay. Andor is. So 5 years before the destruction of the Death Star, we have this guy living on a planet called Carix, I think.
Ferris something?
Ferris.
Doesn't
Ferrix,
matter. Do
Ferrix.
we care?
He's living on Ferrix. He's a thief, kind of eking out a meager existence. He'd gone off on some trip, ended up in a brothel. He's looking for his sister, and things got out of hand. So he goes back to Ferrix, and he starts calling in favors with people to try to get it. He knows they're coming after him, and some things start to happen. This is the first act. There's 4 acts, I'd say. The first act is this, where we meet his friends, his immediate neighborhood, learn about his back, his motivation, those kinds of things. That act ends when he gets recruited as a member of the rebellion.
Not really. That's the thing about this whole... All right, so if I'm going to nitpick for a second, it's that this series is about Andor, and like they're trying to make it about his place in the rebellion against the Empire and this giant conflict between the rebels and what we know as the Empire. And Andor, for a lot of this, felt like a third party, a disinterested third party.
Interesting.
Well, because like you're talking about, he gets recruited, but he's only like kind of recruited for one job.
Yeah, it felt like recruited in the way you like recruit an NPC in like D&D. Like, hey, we got this raid coming up, but we don't have a thief. We need a thief. We need somebody who can speak 2 or 3 languages, who can like finagle with some machines, who's a good planner, who can respond if things go wrong, or this heist that we're planning is going to fail. Oh, I got just the guy. He's trying to sell me something. I kind of need that thing, but what I really need is the guy.
Yeah, and he knows enough, like our recruiter guy. He knows enough about Andor to realize that he does have the skill set necessary to fill in this desperate shortfall in this very important plan that he has going. That because of the timing of the thing could only happen once every 6 or 7 years or some nonsense. So it's very important that it happens right now.
Okay, so the character is Luthen Rael. He has a cover as like an antiques dealer from Coruscant, but secretly he is the man pulling the strings behind the infancy of the rebellion.
Okay, I have 2 comments about our man here. Luthen. 1, Stellan Skarsgård. I didn't know the name. You wrote it down. I knew he was one of the Skarsgårds. I didn't know which one. But Stellan Skarsgård delivers just the best performance ever for this two-faced, just back deal worker. Like this is the guy that you want in every spy thriller movie. Just working every angle, and he's a different role with every person depending on what his situation is, and like he delivers an all-star performance in that.
Okay, so as to a fledgling rebellion, and this is another thing they never deal with. Like, if the rebellion's going to get a bunch of X-wings and come fly, the Battle of Yavin against the Death Star, they're going to need some ships, and they're going to need some pilots, and that stuff's freaking expensive. So
Yeah.
they got a cash flow problem, because as much as people are annoyed with the Empire, the cost of opposing them is pretty high, and so they're going to need some money, but that's going to cause attention from the Empire.
So, and that's what this heist is they are stealing an entire sector's payroll from the Empire for like a quarter, like the entire sector's quarterly payroll or some nonsense. It was like billions on billions of credits.
And it transitions from being Andor's like backstory and his community to like he gets thrown into this group of ragtag early rebels who don't trust him and don't know why they should. And I love the interaction of them all assimilating him into the group with various degrees of trust and mistrust and all their different motivations. And they weren't all just these pure starry-eyed people who want to oppose the Empire. There's all kinds of motivations in this group.
Yeah, we had our true believer. The young kid was writing the manifesto for what the rebellion could be.
Yeah, Karis Nemec.
And then we had the older guy who was just like, yeah, I just hate the Empire's guts, and like this seemed like a good opportunity to stick it to the man.
So he comes in masquerading as a true believer, but really is only there as a mercenary.
Right.
And at some point before the heist is carried out, this becomes known and really causes an upheaval in the group.
Yeah, and I mean,
can we trust a mercenary who isn't in it for the pure reasons?
They were literally on the hike to go do the heist when it came out that he's just a mercenary. He's like, yeah, I'm a mercenary. I'm getting paid to do this. I'm getting paid a lot, and I just want my share of the cash. If you can't trust that, then you need to quit right now.
Yeah. Wow. There were so many things about this. Like, for instance, one of the things that they explored in this, and that feels like what Andor is all about, is exploring all of the nuance that's happening in this totalitarian regime taking control. You know, as Princess Leia said, the tighter you close your fist, the more star systems will slip through your fingers. We see this outpost that has geographic and mineral reasons for being in this location. It's being run by these Imperial people that are like on a deployment. And it felt like political commentary. Tell me if you didn't feel this, Josh. They're like sent to this foreign land. They're at this outpost. They don't like it there. There's locals in the area that are more of an annoyance to them, but they kind of have to tolerate them. And there's this tension with the local culture and the Imperial outpost.
Yeah, and it felt very like that was the first time where you really feel like the Empire's like intruding. Is because they really were messing with like the customs and like some of the festivals and things that the local peoples were doing.
Yeah.
And it was a delicious little scene where like the commander of the post, the Imperial side, came down to their little like token festival that they allowed with like half of the people that were supposed to have been allowed there. And the locals are just like tearing them to pieces in their language, but only one person on the Imperial side spoke that language and agreed with the locals and was just like telling them, it's like, oh man, tell this guy he smells like a goat and I hate his guts. It's like, he said he's very honored that you came down to join the festival, sir.
Yeah, and you saw this firsthand in Afghanistan, didn't you? The same kind of thing. Who knows what that guy's saying?
Yeah. I mean, not that specifically, but that kind of feeling of like this contention between like the locals and then the foreign power that rolls in and feels like they have the right and the capability to do whatever they want.
Yes, we don't have to respect their culture at all. We tolerate it as much as it's convenient for us. We let them do their little annual festival when the meteor shower comes. But maybe next year we won't let them do it at all, because why should we?
Yeah. It did feel they did a good job in making it feel like you mentioned the deployment vibe. Like everybody that worked at that base, they had a couple of scenes.
They're not from there.
They had a couple of scenes like the Imperial troops that were there, and they were talking about like, oh yeah, this meteor shower thing's gonna happen in a couple of days, and like that's the only good thing about being stationed at this dump, and just like it felt very real interactions. Like they're doing an inspection. He's like, why is it I told you to paint this handrail? We need to get this painted, but sir, tomorrow's the festival. It's like, well, you better get this thing painted first thing in the morning then. Like just little crap like that.
Yeah, and everyone had different levels of loyalties. Like the one who was the station commander had been there long enough that spoke their language, had actually started to sympathize with the locals, and maybe didn't think that the Empire was doing such good things there after all. And while he was still trying to appear on the surface like he was being loyal to the Empire, he was kind of undermining their purposes and their orders.
Yeah, they explained his motivations at one point. Like he fell in love with a local, and then something bad happened, or she ended up getting killed or something, and so he was just kind of internally he was just done with the Empire, and
so he was ripe to be turned to the other side when the rebels came looking for a heist.
Which is I presume this is a contact that Luthen developed. And then hooked up with his team. It's like, okay, you know the ins and outs of this base. I'm gonna have a team come in, work with the team, and we're gonna pull something big here.
Yeah. So then the heist happens. They break in. It goes wrong, and I love how chaotic it was. Like people got hurt. You didn't know. It wasn't like guaranteed that everybody was going to make it out alive. They didn't even steal all the money that they were trying to steal because it was heavy and there was logistics problems.
There was again, this was written by adults for adults, and there's just a couple of scenes that really emphasize that this is what would really happen. Like they're in the process of loading just cartloads of heavy metal actual coinage onto this freighter to get the crap out of there. And they're using their hostages as the labor to move this crap over. And one of the hostages was the high commander of this base or whatever. And they've got his family under gunpoint in another room. And they told him, if we don't get out of here clean, we're going to kill you and your whole family. And then there's the random radio operator that cut through the interference and realized that something is not all is well in Amsterdam, whatever that quote is. And he comes down with a couple of guards, like, hey, sir, what's going on? And then
why are you loading all the money into the ship?
And then the base commander, soaked in sweat, is desperately trying to come up with an explanation on the spot, either strong arm this guy or tell him basically,
right, so they won't shoot his family.
Right, you need to shut up and get out of here. Nothing is out of the ordinary. Everything is fine. Please leave.
And of course, he doesn't fall for it. And I love that you point out that this being adult Star Wars for adults, because the rebellion doesn't do this, right? They don't hold women and children hostage in order to steal things. They just do good stuff.
Oh, but Ben, they absolutely did. If you're fighting a totalitarian regime, that's the kind of subterfuge crap that you have to do.
Yes.
There's no other way to get it done.
Yes, and that's really what this explores. Okay, so that act ends. They successfully carry out the heist, and you think it would just all go into the rearview mirror. But just like the shooting at the brothel, there's implications of this. Now that they have the money, they can't just spend it. They got to launder it. So then the political machine opens up, and we meet a whole bunch of new characters.
Well, hey, before that even starts, I love the scene where all right, somebody got hurt, so they're going to go to this planet where they have a sympathetic doctor that can look at this guy, and they're on this moon somewhere, and the guy's getting worked on, and it's Andor and the other mercenary guy, and they're sitting there, and the mercenary guy goes, that ship is full of what, 4 billion credits? I'll bet you and I could split that down the middle.
The double cross.
Of course, the inevitable double cross. And they're sitting there talking. This guy's just saying, it's we could just leave them in that building right now, take off with that cruiser, and never be seen again, and live wonderful lives forever and ever and ever. And what's great about that scene is that it plays out kind of the same way, where just as you as the audience are realizing, oh crap!
I either have to go for this or shoot him.
If he says yes, then he's clearly the bad guy, and the rebels are screwed. But if he says no, this guy's going to off him right now, because this is not an offer that can be refused.
Right.
And in the middle of
can't refuse.
Yeah, in the middle of him talking, Andor has to off him. And then you think, oh, well, everything's fine now. But no, he keeps his gun out. I was like, all right, listen, the guy that you've trusted for months that pulled this job off, that was one of your best friends, I just shot him outside because he tried to double cross you.
And you didn't get to hear anything he said. I don't have proof of what he said. You just have to take my word for it.
Yeah, I know you.
Oh, I loved that scene.
I know you don't believe me, so here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to take the share of the money that I was promised, and I'm going to leave, and you're never going to see me again. And honestly, that's the smartest thing he could have done in that situation.
Oh, yeah. It was great. It was such good writing and such well for this to play out all of the conflict that had arisen.
Now, this is the part of the story that goes off the rails a little bit for me, okay? So here's basically we have this thing like you were talking about. It goes in this big political machinations of the second or the third and fourth chapters.
These other plot threads that are running because
Right.
his is done for the time being. He goes on vacation with his money.
And we found out one, Luthen wanted all this money to be able to fund the fledgling rebellion that's happening, and two, he did it because he wants the Empire to tighten its grip that will actually generate more hostility.
Yes.
So it'll actually create troops.
We
for this
want
rebellion.
the Empire to reveal their true colors so that people will be willing to stand up against them, but that requires conflict, and that means people are going to die and bad things are going to happen.
Okay, so we have this big Star Warsy plot that's happening. And then off to the side, we have this tangent of Andor, who is a mercenary that successfully pulled a job, got a huge payday, and is just out in the wind. And
right.
he's
like, I don't care about the Empire.
Right, and he has this whole misadventure off all by himself, and he has no idea of all these other machinations.
He goes and pays off his debts at his home planet and then takes off.
Right, but he is a loose end to this giant thing that happened, and he can identify key players, and so like the entire giant Star Warsy political plot is like everybody realizes we've got to find Andor because he's the linchpin, he's the one loose end that we can tug on to bring this whole thing down. And everybody realizes it, and everybody wants him, and he has no idea. He's just out trying to live his best life on this beach planet.
Yeah, I don't care. I did what I said I'd do. Now, I like that he thinks he's under the delusion that he can ignore the Empire. He can pretend like they don't exist. They don't care about him. He doesn't care about them. He can just go on living his life.
This goes back to what I've been saying forever. Like, if you're a normal rank-and-file, day-to-day guy in the Empire probably doesn't interfere with your lifestyle that much.
Yes, but then it does.
But then, yeah, he basically gets arrested for being in the wrong place at the wrong time. And he gets a summary judgment. And they even said, the judge in the room said, what are his charges? Oh, this, and this. And he's like, do I get to talk in my defense? No, you don't. Normally this was a 6-month charge, but we changed the rules a little bit a while back. So 6 years, federal penitentiary, bye, click, and stamped something and just ship him off.
Yeah. So then opens the third act where he is in prison. Now, like you said, all these other plot threads are happening with the money laundering and the political things happening, but Andor is stuck in prison and we meet another new character.
And this is where we really start to get into our Senator Mon Mothma.
Yes. Okay, so let's talk about her because she's a well-known character. If you've seen the original Star Wars movies, she's the one in the room that's narrating as they're looking at the plans of the Death Star and telling everyone what the plan is. So we have to go back and find out how did she get from nobody to being this leader in the rebellion.
And so I'm still this is where the intrigue got a little deep for me, and the back and forth and the miscued timelines.
Oh man, I loved it.
It was
good. Eating it up.
I enjoyed all of the back and forth and the play and the spy and the counter espionage that was happening. They realized the driver was a spy, so she started planting false ideas with the driver. That stuff was cool. I appreciated that. But I'm still unclear because it's clear. I understand that she is kind of an involuntary partner with Luthen. She knows who Luthen is and she knows what he's funding, but she's on board conceptually, but not practically.
Yeah. Yeah, and you can tell that they have a very different scope. That of all the levels in this ladder, from her at the very top to a guy like Andor at the very bottom, there's a big gap between Luthen and Mon Mothma, where she's like, hey, you don't understand. I have a lot of political power here. I represent an entire planet. I'm talking to the Emperor himself, and I have to be careful. I can't slip up even a little bit. I can't make sloppy moves. I can't guess. I can't do things that are careless.
And a lot of her problems are revolving around the finances. The Empire's locking down how money moves from one place to another with this anticipation that there's going to be some funding of illegitimate activities often, whatever.
Yes.
And I'm still, this is the part that I want to clear about is they're working together and they have the same goals, but she does not like Luthen and his concept of where this needs to go.
No, because he does stuff without asking her and stuff she wouldn't agree to, and she finds it distasteful. She wants to believe that she can lead a rebellion that has these pure motives and exists solely on the purity of its ideals and doesn't have to delve into the dirty side of things.
I did feel like there's a bit of a power struggle here. As you're talking about, they have different intentions for how this is going to go down. And it seems like Mon Mothma has a very high ideal of this is how you change a system that is too oppressive, versus Luthen, who is like, no, the way you change it is you burn it down. And it seems almost like they're peers in this rebel development. Like, yeah, she's politically way higher than him, but it feels like he has just as much leverage over her as she has over him.
Yeah. Okay, so that's all burning. Meanwhile, in the background, all those other characters, and we've got leftover plot threads from Cyril Karn and from Andor's friends back on Ferrix, Bix Killeen, and some other guys. Then we also meet all the crew that he did the heist with, and now he's been thrown into prison, and we meet a whole nother group.
Oh yeah, that really felt like a jarring shift. I'm like, wait, we're just in prison now? Like, we're doing the whole prison thing? And
yeah, like bam. It almost felt like the walls closed in around us. It was this stark white prison where all the guards had on these insulated boots and the prisoners were all barefoot. And at a moment's notice, the guards could flip a switch, electrocute the floors, and kill everyone but them. Or at least give them a good shock and tell them who's boss.
Yeah, and I mean, I get that makes for a pretty legit prison. And then it was also very clever of the prison that all the cells was just this open hallway where the floor could be electrified and was electrified during their sleeping time, so they weren't allowed to leave their little box or cube or whatever. But also in every cube was the counter. This is how many days you have left to serve, and we will let you go. And what was it? At some point they even said, like, there was a day when all the numbers tripled.
Yeah.
And they were all asking him, like, when he came in, because he's the newest guy in this team, and they're some factory worker, like they're prisoners, like they're forced labor, they're building crap.
Here's another real life parallel. I feel like this came right out of the book Catch-22, which was set in the waning years of World War II, where you've got these bomber crews stationed in Italy that were flying sorties over Germany, or I think they were on one of the islands. They were in like Sicily or something. They were flying sorties over Italy, and they had a certain number of missions they had to fly before they were complete and could go home.
And they kept upping it right before anybody got to that number.
Yes, I think this was on purpose.
Well, maybe just hearkening back to that.
Yes.
But the idea here was that the Empire at some point passed some legislation that took everybody that was currently incarcerated and tripled their sentence. And they were asking, like, what, are people mad? Like, did this get out? What are there riots in the streets about this? And he's like, I have no idea what you're talking about.
So for almost the first full episode of this, Andor is just outraged, and he's like, this is a mistake. I shouldn't be here. I wasn't involved. It trumped up charges. Doesn't matter. I want to get out. He feels like Andy did on Shawshank Redemption when he first got thrown in there. Like, I don't belong here. This is a mistake. Miscarriage of justice. Certainly the system is interested in justice. I've got to get out of here.
I'm just a tourist. He kept saying this.
He's
over
not
and
like
over.
He doesn't look at his number in the cell and think, okay, that's how many until I get out of there. He's think, how do I shortcut this? So we meet Kino Loy, played by Andy Serkis. Of fame in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, Lord of the Rings. Man, what a trifecta. Now he's in Star Wars. Andy Serkis, as Golem from Lord of the Rings, Claw from Black Panther. This guy, just a powerhouse, and really represents the everyman. Like, okay, I don't belong in here either, but I don't see any way to stop the Empire from holding me here. So I am just going to be as good as I possibly can at my job, make sure everyone around me complies, and if I do everything I'm supposed to do, when that number gets to 0, I get to go back to my life.
Yeah. And like our Andor approaches him and is like, how many guards on every floor? And so I was asking specific questions about, like, this is the information I need to know to get out of here. And the guy looks back at him and he goes, I have 271 more shifts. And if you jeopardize that, I will put you into the ground myself. Like, again, this is the whole, like, I'm on my way out, stop messing with me mentality.
So once Andor transitions from thinking he can shortcut the miscarriage of justice to realizing that the Empire will not be stopped and that they don't care and they might even be doing this on purpose to get slave labor. What are we all building here anyway? We don't really know. And every day they come in and build these giant metal contraptions, and we kind of have hints at what they might be for, but we don't know.
There is absolutely no way that their job couldn't be automated and be more efficient to have just machinery doing it.
They have a few throwaway lines like, why couldn't this be done by droids? And they say, we're cheaper than droids.
I mean, they are indentured labor at that point. Like, I mean, yes. I get that, but they still got to feed them. You don't have to feed a droid.
Yeah, it was just a plot device.
Yeah, it's just generic motivation for Andor to hate the Empire. I get that.
So Andor makes a transition from that, and then something happens in the prison that changes the equation. They they find out that a guy in another cell got to 0, and instead of letting him out, they moved him to another wing.
Yes,
And
and
gave him a new number.
that wing found out that he was supposed to have been released, and they ended up just killing everybody in that room as opposed to trying to correct the mistake.
So then he finally convinces Kino Loy, and I'm going to put this second on my list of great speeches in Andor that I think stand alone in the Star Wars universe. And that is when Andor is trying to tell Kino Loy that they've got to stand up against the Empire. Like, I get that you're risk adverse. I get that you think that when that number gets to 0, you're going to get out of here. But that's not going to happen. The only way we're going to get out of here is if we make our own rules instead of following theirs.
All right, so I'm going to take a guess that your number one speech was Luthen's speech to his insider at the ISB. Yeah, I mean, that was just gold.
It stands alone in the Star Wars universe. Okay, so they're in the prison. Things change. They plan the escape, and it goes pretty much like any prison movie escape. You know, they figure out the weaknesses in the system. It roughly goes according to plan. The prisoners rise up, and they go out. And now Andor's back in the world. And he still hasn't made the character transformation. He's not like, all right, I'm sick of the Empire. How can I sign up?
Well, we're glossing over a lot of cool character moments in that, like the fact that they had to swim to freedom, and then Kino is standing there at the edge while everybody's trying to bail, and he's like, "Come on, Kino!" He's like, "I can't swim," and then Andor gets shoved off the platform, and we never see Kino again. Oh, Kino, he sacrificed everything, and he can't get away. They randomly found some 2 aliens that were fishing in a terrible pond that turned out to be rebels and helped them escape the planet. Like there was a lot going on there. Oh, yeah, and then the worst, like Andor before he left his vacation planet, hid all of his money and his like personal goods on top of a shower head, and it was still there. One, it was still there, worst cleaning crews ever. And second, like the room was just like, it was occupied. There was somebody sleeping in it. And he just walked in. What kind of a hotel is this? Was there even a door? I have so many questions.
I can always count on you for that kind of nonsense, Josh. I'm imagining like the writer's room. You're like, hang on a sec, guys. Let's talk this here. Like, no, we got to keep moving. We're off budget and behind schedule. We just need to wave some plot, do some hand waving and get out of here.
Oh, listen, he hit it on top of the shower head. Nobody found it. It's fine. Like, isn't this supposed to be a fancy, expensive resort planet? Wouldn't there be scanners for crap like this?
Okay, I want to zoom out again for a moment.
He had a gun. The gun had ammo and batteries or something in it that's illicit. They've got to be scanning for that.
At every level of this, we get little moments where we zoom in and out of like the guards' lives and we hear their dialogue, we hear their motivations, and it all just feels so rich and believable. The sets, the acting, the everything, it just feels like you're in the Star Wars universe. And like I said, nary a Jedi or a lightsaber. You see a TIE fighter fly overhead, but otherwise it just, you're able to utilize all of the lore that you have to feel the nuance of everything that's happening as the Empire's tightening their grip.
I am on record as saying that it's a good Star Wars movie when stormtroopers are scary. Like you see a stormtrooper on the screen, you're like, oh crap, this is some serious crap that's going to go down. Like that's the power level that we should be at. Stormtroopers are the penultimate, right? Oh,
yes.
Hang on. This reminded me of something my son said that I absolutely have to get on the record. Okay. There was one scene where our ISB person came to the planet and she was being escorted by 2 death troopers.
Imperial Security Bureau.
Yeah, for those of you who don't know what death troopers are, anytime you see a stormtrooper that's in all black armor, that's a death trooper. They're like spec ops, okay? And then my son, who is a Star Wars fanatic, he mentions because I say out loud, ooh, death troopers. And my son goes, you have to kill 4 people to become a death trooper. And me and my wife, both having served in the military, at the same time looked at him and said, that's not that many people, Carter. Now, here's the thing, Ben. This is the thing. My son looks at me and he goes, it is for a stormtrooper. And you know what? He's absolutely right. If a stormtrooper kills 4 people, he is definitely spec ops material.
Good. Carter, well done. Good. Top-notch Star Wars joke. A+. That's great. So there's another plot thread that we haven't talked about a lot that I really want to get into because this is one I felt a lot of relevance, and that is we're starting to zoom into the middle management at the Imperial Security Bureau.
We get these little snippets of what is essentially every military staff meeting we've ever been to.
Yes. So our character in this scenario is Deidre Miro. I assume she's like a lieutenant or a junior captain. They call her supervisor. And she has a small group of things that she's responsible for, and she reports to a superior officer who reports to a superior officer who's responsible for the whole thing. And she starts to realize that there are things happening that show a broader picture of perhaps coordination of a rebellion that goes beyond a single hotspot.
Right. And so then we get this fun little thing of, again, she's like Cyril in a lot of ways in that she sees this picture, but she's also highly motivated to like follow the rules and do what she's supposed to be doing. But she kind of has to fight her own bureaucracy to make them realize, one, that there is a problem, and two, we are attacking it in the wrong way.
So she's starting to see little stats and stuff, but she realizes I can't paint this whole picture unless I get access to things that are outside of my job jar. And so she starts trying to get into other people's areas to get the information she needs, and it looks like she's trying to climb the career ladder.
And I'll tell you what, Ben, all of the dialogue between her and her peers, when the peers are telling her, hey, you need to settle down, that just struck so true. Like, would you...
To me too, Josh.
Would you stay out of my chili? Like, I'm doing my job, you do your job. Why
hey,
are you over
you're
here?
Trying to look so hot in front of the boss. Why don't you just do your job and get out of my stuff?
Yeah.
And then there was those scenes where they'd call her in front of the Major Partagaz, and the ISB chief, and basically both of their boss, and he'd be like, so, the other guy tells me that you're trying to get into his stuff. What do you have to say for yourself?
Right, and she gets these tiny opportunities to try to actually justify her actions. And
yeah,
this was interesting in that I was expecting, because I'm a cynical person, that this boss is going to shut her down and shut her down hard. But guy,
he did.
He in some instances he did, or what he didn't do is he didn't shut her off. Is he took her vector, her thruster, and her motivation, and he just pointed it in a new direction. Like, he didn't destroy her as a subordinate or her motivation to do her job. He just redirected it in a way that was useful, which is, that guy got his job for a reason.
What a good supervisor should do.
Yes, exactly.
Like, you've got a bunch of junior officers working for you. You don't want to destroy their motivation, but you do want to maintain clear lines of responsibility so that things aren't getting mixed up.
Yeah. And so, like, he did chastise her, like, hey, stay out of this guy's chili. But two, why aren't you responding to her requests when she's asking for information?
Yeah. Yeah, so her character is kind of growing, and she's realized she is the one detective inside the ISB that smells the rebellion growing as it's happening, and she's starting to zero in on the character of Luthen Rail.
Yes, and they call him Axis. They gave him some code name because they realize there's a fixer that's the link between like the upper echelon and the finance and like the actual operations, and this is the linchpin. And from everything we've seen to this point, it really feels like Luthen is the guy that started the rebellion.
Yeah, I would say that's probably true. Meanwhile, there is a person working for Luthen that's on the ISB.
That whole thing was just crazy go nuts. Because like there were so many things that had to fall into place to make this scenario so real. Like, first of all, he had to go visit one of the characters that we know from the previous Star Wars movie sets, like that. I don't know what his name was, but he's the hardcore zealot rebellion guy, and he's got his handful of X-wings and his diehard zealots that work with him.
Yeah, he was in the movie. He's played by Forrest Whitaker.
Yeah.
Saw Gerrera.
Saw, and he goes to see Saw, and he's like, "Hey, Saw."
Right.
I've got stuff for you, but I need.
He's already a rebel, but he doesn't want to be part of their team.
Yeah, he's doing his own thing, and Luthen's trying to do the thing where he's trying to take all of these.
He hates both sides. He hates rebellion and he hates the Empire.
Well, the rebellion isn't hardcore enough for him. That's Saw's problem.
Yeah,
and Luthen is still trying to reel him in, like, hey, you could be an asset. He's like, hey, I've got another guy who's going to run an operation, and I want you to be a part of it. And this is how we learn about this, like, second, third hand. We never meet the guy that's going to go run this operation. But we know that there's going to be some big thing that happens against the Empire, and he's asking Saw for help, and Saw flips in the fingers and says, get out of here. And then we find out from our internal ISB guy, and that's the thing, is Luthen gets tipped off, like, hey, we know about the operation that's going to happen, and like the ISB guy comes down to tell him that. And now Luthen is faced with the choice of either he has to burn the team that's going to go do this operation, and all those guys are going to die, or He tips them off. They don't run the operation, and now ISB is looking internal for the mole.
It's the classic intel gain-loss dilemma.
Yes!
If we do something about this, we'll tip our hand to the bad guys, but if we don't, people on our team will die.
And it was a really well-played scenario with this ISB internal, like this mole that they had set up for years to get him into his position. And now he's got a
Sully
life.
Remy.
He was only in like one episode, and he did a very good job of selling the fact that, like, yes, I am dedicated to this. I'm so dedicated that I have pretended to be something that I'm not for many, many years, but now I've got a wife and kids, and this is getting a little too real for me.
Yeah, so he goes down to Luthen, and he's like, I want out. Like, how do I get out? How do I...
No, he did the thing that every spy thinks that they can do, is go to their boss and be like, hey, I'm out. This is it. I'm done. And then Luthen basically laughs in his face. He's like, you're done when I say you're done.
Yeah, and gives what's probably the best monologue. It's 2 minutes long, and he's standing here in this darkened corridor telling his mole that he's got to go back to work and do his job.
Because the mole asks him, is like, the mole's like crying. It's like, I've got everything. I'm risking my whole life. What are you risking? And then, like... says, yeah, as soon as he said that, it's like, what are you risking? And it goes back to Luthen. He's quiet for a second. I go, everything? And Luthen delivers the best speech explaining exactly what everything is.
I got a few quotes from it here. He says, I am condemned to use the tools of my enemy to defeat them. I burn my decency for someone else's future. I burn my life to make a sunrise that I know I'll never see.
Ugh. Again, this goes back to our Skarsgård brother. That was an Academy Award winning like delivering of this speech of this person that's like,
oh yeah,
like you could feel it. Like he's a very composed guy. His whole life is putting on faces for other people, and you can see his composure start to crack as he's delivering this speech ever so slightly because this guy touched a nerve so deep he didn't realize he still had it.
Yeah. So all these things are starting to come to a head, and Luthen realizes the Empire is zeroing in on Andor as the person that could lead them to Luthen, and Luthen is making the same realization. The Andor is the person that could lead the Empire to me.
Meanwhile, Andor just broke out of jail and has no idea any of this is happening.
And he is now the most wanted man in the galaxy. The Empire's looking for him, the Rebellion's looking for him, and then his mom dies back on his home planet, and everybody realizes this is the chance to get him.
Freaking everybody. And when we say everybody, we mean this idiot, our guy from episode 1 that I love so much.
Cyril Karn.
Cyril even hears about it from the other guy that got fired that was super hardcore about finding Andor. And these two idiots, they show them having a conversation via hologram, which was great because the connection was terrible and there was still background noise. I love that. I love the idea that interstellar communication is possible, but it's basically the level of really crappy long distances now. That makes sense. But then it cuts from them having that conversation to them sitting on a starship on the planet. Like, wait a minute, did you two idiots both take leave from your new jobs, pay money out of your pocket to travel to a planet to what? Try to catch a guy that committed murders that clearly nobody cares about? Like,
yeah, could you imagine you and I like taking leave from our jobs and going to Ukraine right now?
All right, people have done this. This is the thing. People do this, but I don't understand them. It's like, I'm going to drop everything because I believe in the cause of the Ukrainian people so much that I'm going to upend my entire life to go try to do something to help. And like, I mean, good on you, but you're still
but for
crazy.
Cyril, it's more like, I'm going to Ukraine to help fight for the Russians who are trying to restore order to Eastern Europe.
Right? That's what this is. And it's just, Disney, if you're listening to me,
of course they are, Josh.
You absolutely need to pay off Cyril's character in the next season, or I'm going to lose it because I like him too much to just go away.
So back to my outside stuff, Josh. They just started filming season 2 back in August.
Okay.
Back in November, and they should be done by August of next year. So it's not too late. I don't think they're going to give up on Cyril's character.
No, the last episode there was like a big everything went to hell in a handbasket like you would expect it to do, and Cyril ended up like saving our ISB investigator lady, and there was some weird like. It was a weird scene where they ended up in like a supply closet somehow, so they were like physically very close.
He rescued her off the street in the middle of a riot. It makes sense they would duck into a supply closet.
Yeah, I get that, but there was just some weird character chemistry that was happening in that moment, so I'm not sure
Yeah,
where that's
yeah,
going to
yeah,
go, but we'll find out.
yeah. Okay, so a character we haven't talked about yet is Marva Andor, who is Cassian's adopted mother, and she gives this fiery speech. Honorable mention to
Post-mortem.
her in my speeches that ignites the rebellion, and this now becomes a flashpoint. This is exactly what Luthen was looking for, and in the course of all this, it turns out that everyone that's looking for Andor, he's able to escape, and at some point, it becomes clear that he could now he knows now that he's the most wanted man in the galaxy, and he could just disappear and not be relevant to either side. But, and this is what I loved about this 12 episode series, they wanted to take this apathetic, chaotic, neutral person and convert him and move him on the alignment chart
Yeah, and I'm not sure, like, whatever his motivations
to
are.
chaotic good or neutral good.
He had multiple forces that were pushing him in this direction to, like, become a more active player in the rebellion. First of all,
His loyalty to Marva, his adopted mother.
His loyalty to Marva and the fact that she was dead set against the Empire this entire time.
Yes.
And he was kind of apathetic towards it, and then she basically gave her life trying to fight them. Then the firsthand experience that he had with, like, the screwed up justice system and, like, the complete disregard for human life that the Empire showed to him.
We haven't even mentioned Bix, Colleen, his friend, who they tortured to try to find him.
Yeah, the weird pseudo love interest that
Yeah.
they just did horrible things to because it's the Empire and that's what you do. And he just has all of these different. It's a combination of all of these slight pushes in this direction, followed by an opportunity to actually do something because he knows Luthen. He contacts Luthen and he has an opportunity to actually do something about it.
Yeah. And so then at the very end, the riot's gone down. The dust is starting to settle. You know the Empire's going to be back in force. And the rebellion is got their igniting event that they've been looking for.
Which, again, I don't get. Like, yeah, Marva gave this wonderful post-mortem speech on this hologram projected from one of the best droid characters I've ever seen in a Star Wars franchise.
Yeah.
The very slow and very outdated, desperately in need of a memory and a firmware upgrade, BMO. Like, she's giving this speech and it fires up this giant crowd of people in this city against the Empire. And the whole time she's doing this and people are getting fired up and, like, lighting their Molotov cocktails, I'm just sitting here like, I mean, like, yeah, the Empire has taken a couple of people off the street and interrogated them, but I haven't seen the crack of the whip that they keep talking about. You know what I mean? Like, they haven't delivered to me for these people on this planet. What has the Empire done that's so bad that you're willing to light a Molotov cocktail over?
I don't know, Josh. I think you're kind of missing the crumbs that they left all along the way. There was Bix's boyfriend that reported to the investigator that was trying to investigate the murder. He got murdered. Everyone knew him. There was, the guards that all showed up and tried to restrict their traditional observance of the funeral the same way that they did about the tradition on the other planet.
Okay. I see what you're saying, but, like, I don't know. Maybe I'm just too pro-Empire. Because I'm thinking, like, these breadcrumbs that you're talking about, that's not enough to, like, start a revolution over. You know what I mean?
Yeah, because really at the heart of it is what is what Luthen was talking about. Somebody has to take some risk and maybe not ever live to see the sunrise that they're trying to protect for everyone else.
Yeah, they're leaning a little bit hard on the idea. Oh, Empire bad. We don't have to tell you why because they're bad. And you know that they're bad, so they're bad.
I don't know. I felt like they adequately showed that they were ruthless and not going to be stopped. And that if you wait, they're going to just get more power and the opportunity to resist them will become less and less as time goes on.
Again, this is the first series that has actually made me feel like, okay, maybe the Empire needs to have some things change. For example, oh, hey, doctor, can you please encourage this person to talk? And he's like, oh, we've been doing these great experiments with this random, the children of an alien species screams that does permanent psychological damage to the people that hear it. We're trying to isolate it and make it a little more effective. Here, listen for half an hour and let me know what you think. Yeah, she was Vix. Vix was broken forever, very clearly. So that's on the side of, like, can't you just, like, I don't know, give her a truth serum like they did to Leia, the little droid with the syringe? That seems more humane than this.
So All right, so we've reached the end. There's this culminating scene where Andor goes and finds Luthen, uses his thief skills to find this unfindable guy.
Hang on a second, I have to get this in there. Like Luthen is getting on his ship to leave the planet forever, having not found Andor, and Andor turns out to be on the ship like any good espionage agent would. He would be there waiting for you when you least expected him to show up.
Right.
Now, can I just say that we got one scene that demonstrates Luthen's ship that he flies around the galaxy in is everything that we want the Millennium Falcon to be, but it isn't. It just isn't. Like, Luthen's ship is now my number one. This is what a Star Wars Rebel, like, infiltration ship is supposed to be.
Oh, yeah.
Like, he had countermeasures for the tractor beam, which was awesome.
Oh, man, that was great.
Deliberately pushed up his thrusters to make them crank up the power on the tractor beam, and then just dumped a ton of sharp metal out the back of his ship.
So that it sucked it all in?
So it would shred the whole freaking tractor beam mechanism behind him. And then he had, like, armored, like, the wings that were there that you thought were just, like, solar things or whatever came down and became armor plating. Automated gun turrets that actually hit what they were shooting for. And then, like, an Iron Man 2 style red laser out the sides of his ship as he goes into a corkscrew and just shreds every enemy fighter as he's calculating his hyper jump out of there.
Josh, you found your calling. This is the guy you need to be in the writer's room.
Well, this is what starships are supposed to do.
Yeah. The guy who plans the space battle. Okay, so Andor's waiting for Luthen in his ship, and he comes in, and this is the confrontation. Luthen's been looking. He's told us he will kill Andor on sight, and there he is. And Andor's like, I know you want to kill me. There's the weapon. So here's my ultimatum. Let me join the rebellion or kill me.
And this is the thing. Like, this is one of the nitpicks that I have for this movie, because Luthen has already demonstrated through and through that he is willing to torch anything and, like, burn his own humanity to maintain the rebellion, right? And he's said multiple times that Andor is a loose end because he was never part of this in the first place. He just had too much information, blah, blah, whatever. Like, he should have offed him right then. Like, he should have picked him.
But that's what the gun gambit proved. It's, hey, I've changed. This is the only way I can think to show you. Just like before when he was like, hey, the guy in the other room double-crossed you. He was going to steal all the money. I blew him up, but there's no way for you to know that. It's the only way for me to prove to you that I didn't do this on purpose is to only take my share and leave.
Yeah.
And now he's doing this again. He's like, Luthen, the only way for you to know that I've changed and I now want to join you, not just because I'm a mercenary, but because I believe in your cause, is that you have power to kill me.
Okay. You know what, Ben? I think you just flipped my mind on this. You're right. Like, he based on the other circumstances we've seen where Andor is put in the same situation and how he handles them, he basically flipped the narrative to demonstrate his willingness to be the changed character. Okay, you've convinced me.
Okay. And then after the credits, we get the reveal of what they'd been building in the prison, of course.
Oh,
you didn't watch this?
I didn't watch the after credit scene. No, what are they building in the prison?
I love that you don't know this.
I assumed they were like AT-AT knee joints or something.
No, it was the weapons array on the Death Star.
Of course they were. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, it was great. Okay, and then the season ends and we'll see what happens next. Now, this cast is so full of powerhouse performances, it's hard to single any out. Like you said, Stellan Skarsgård's performance as Luthen Rail is just off the charts. Mon Mothma, we didn't even talk about her dilemma with her husband and her daughter, but that just blew me away. Everywhere. But Diego Luna as Cassian Andor really shown out here, and he's nominated for a Golden Globe for his performance for Best Actor in a television series, totally deservedly. This thing just absorbed me, Josh. It actually considers the nuts and bolts of operating an authoritarian regime and just how many people are willing to go along with the Empire's atrocities for the smallest slice of personal gain. It just blew me away.
This was good, and I enjoyed it, and I liked watching it. But this wasn't it blew my mind every second that it was on the screen. That it wasn't that. It wasn't like beyond amazing for me. It was good. And if nothing else, it's a wonderful proof of concept that I want from the people that hold this IP, that they realize that there is a lot of storytelling space in the Star Wars universe that doesn't involve people that are so stupidly overpowered that you have to concoct insane scenarios to actually put them into danger. I'm looking at you, Emperor, coming out of nowhere.
Rising up Star Destroyers out of the dirt.
Right. If the only way that you can put your main characters into peril is to have a zombie lich wizard raise his hands and summon hundreds of Star Destroyers that are fully manned somehow, you've gone off the rails.
Josh, that was a great final word. I can't wait until Andor Season 2 in 2024. Until then, we'll find other ways to spoil Star Wars. Unfortunately, we've done just about as much damage as we can do here. Next time, Josh and I are going to take on artificial intelligence, which has kind of been blowing up lately.
Yeah, specifically ChatGPT. And Ben, I'm have a little teaser for you here.
All right, go ahead.
Okay, so remember the whole thing I did at the beginning of the episode for 88 with the piano keys and the
Yeah.
ChatGPT wrote that whole thing for me.
Wait, that was done by artificial intelligence?
I went to ChatGPT. I said, "What are some interesting things about the number 88?" It gave me a list, and I asked, "Give me some more information about this one." And I said, "I co-host a podcast. Please give me a 2-minute introduction about this topic," and it spit it out. Now, I changed the words to make it sound like it came from me, but ChatGPT did the whole thing start to finish.
Wow. Artificial intelligence has invaded the Bad at Magic podcast. Well, if you want to talk about that or about Star Wars Andor, about any of the things we want to talk about today, please join us on social media. You can go to our Facebook page and make a comment there, or you can go to our subreddit. Happy to hear from you. Love to hear what you have to say.
If you like what we do, consider sharing us with a friend. If you like us, maybe your friends will like us too. If you're willing to show us some love, consider taking your phone out of your pocket and giving us a good review on the podcast player of your choice. It's crazy the visibility we get from that, and thank you to everyone who has already done that. And if you want me and Ben to sit and spoil Star Wars, and sometimes actually spoil Star Wars from now until the end of time, consider becoming a patron on our Patreon page, and a huge thank you to those of you who already are.
Yes. And until next time, try to be a little less bad at magic.